Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Planning and Placemaking Committee of the 6th of July 2022. My name is Councillor Ian Massey, and I'm the convener of the Planning and Placemaking Committee. Can I introduce the top table for you today? We have Councillor Grant Stewart, my Vice Convener, Mr. Christian Smith, Development Management and Building Standards Service Manager, Mr. Paul Williamson, Team Leader, Mr. Sean Panton, Team Leader, Mr. Jeff Fogg from Legal, and Mr. Danny Williams, Committee Services. Danny, do we have any apologies or substitutions today?
Hi, Convener, thank you. No, we don't have any recorded apologies or substitutes. Oh, I think Councillor Braun.
Sorry, Convener. I've just had a message. Councillor Reid and Councillor James can't get in. Can they be invited in? The message come through. There's been no problems joining.
Yeah, we can certainly try and get them in now, Councillor Braun. Thank you for bringing that to attention. Other than that, Convener, as I say, no, received no or substitutions.
I think that's Councillor Reid. Is in. Councillor Reid, are you there?
I think so.
Yeah.
Who knows, though?
So am I, Convener. Thank you very much for calling us in.
Right, so that's everyone present again. Can I remind everybody, and I'm sure that you already know, as this is a hybrid meeting, members joining virtually are reminded that if you leave the meeting during the consideration of any application, you will be unable to participate or vote on that item when you return to the meeting. Unfortunately, this also means that if a member loses their internet connection during consideration of an item, that they should tell the clerk of this and therefore will be unable to vote on the item. And also, while we are operating in a hybrid meeting for the proceedings today, can I remind councillors and officers to use the chat box to attract my attention, which all members should have access to. Q for question, C for comment. I will now ask the clerk to advise of the members participating today. Please make clear to the clerk that you are present. This is for the recording of the meeting and can also be recorded by the clerk. Thank you. Danny.
Yes, thank you, Convener. And what I'll do in line with what we did last time in this committee is I'll just, for the record, make a note of the members that are here and we'll do more of a roll call for the members that are participating virtually. So Councillor Anderson is in the chambers, Councillor Braun is also in the chambers, Councillor Cuthbert is in the chambers, Councillor Drysdale is in the chambers, Councillor Illingworth is in the chambers, Councillor James.
Remember to unmute. Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor James. Councillor Leishman was in the chambers. Convener yourself, you're here. Councillor McLaren.
Yeah, present.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart is with us in the chambers. Councillor Waters is also with us in the chambers, as is Councillor Williamson. So that's full attendance there, Convener. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. We move on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Can you put DI in the chat, please? Councillor Brian Leishman.
Yes, thank you, Convener. I have a non-financial declaration of interest in item 521 and request to leave the chambers for the duration of that item. Thank you.
Thank you for that. There's no more declarations of interest. Can I ask the committee to agree to hear deputations on items 511, 521, 524 and 525? Can we agree this? Thank you. Can we also agree the minutes of the meetings of the Planning and Development Management Committee meeting of the 13th of April and the minutes of the meeting of the Planning and Placemaking Committee of the 1st of June 2022? Can we agree these minutes? Let's us move swiftly on to the first application. First application is 21/02284 FLM, erection of 78 dwelling houses forming suds, ponds, landscaping and associated works, land 90 metres east of 16 Hebridean Gardens, Kincardine Road, Crieff. And can I ask Christian Smith to speak to the report, please?
Yeah, it's actually myself, convener. Thank you. So thank you and good morning, councillors. The first item on the agenda today is for the erection of 78 dwelling houses and associated works on vacant land to the east of Hebridean Gardens, Crieff. Firstly, a quick update on the committee report before you today. Paragraph 51 on page 52 ends, the play park will. This should instead read, the play park will be secured via planning condition. Moving to the application itself now, the applicant is Campion Homes and the site benefits from an extant planning permission for 115 dwelling houses. It is worth noting that no public objections were received regarding the proposed development. The only reason the application is before you today is because it is defined as a major planning application. I'll now move to a presentation to outline the detail and context of the proposals. Next slide, please. This first slide shows the location of the site within Crieff. To give you your bearings, the large building to the southwest of the site above the B8062 annotation is Crieff High School. The development site itself is surrounded to the north, west and south by existing housing and to the east by an agricultural field. All of the site is within the Crieff settlement boundary. Next slide, please. This next slide shows the location plan in greater detail, showing the relationship of the site to the existing housing. The road to the immediate north is Maxton Road, the road to the immediate west is Hebridean Gardens, and the cul-de-sac to the immediate south is Skye Crescent. Next slide, please. This site plan shows the planning permission which was granted in 2007. This permission was implemented in part, therefore it could be completed in accordance with this plan without any further approval from the Council's Planning Authority. This is therefore a significant material consideration in the determination of this application. Next slide, please. This slide shows the proposed site plan as part of the application before you today. As seen, it is relatively similar to the extant planning permission. However, there are some improvements to the road network and the permeability of the site. The house types have also changed to reflect the designs of Campion Homes, and features such as a central open space and footpaths to the east and south have been retained. I will now move to a series of photographs showing the site in its present state. This first photograph shows the site when viewed from Reed Place. The housing to the left is Reed Place, and the house you can just see the gable of to the right of the image is on Hebridean Gardens. As seen, the site is currently fenced off. Next slide, please. This image is taken from the junction of Kincardine Road, Maxton Road and Reed Place. One of the two site vehicular accesses will be obtained from approximately the centre point of this photograph. A footpath will also be created down the left-hand side of the road. Next slide, please. This image is taken from the same junction as the last photograph, but instead is taken looking east towards Maxton Road. Again, a footpath is proposed along this section of road. Next slide, please. This photograph shows the approximate location of the second vehicular access into the site. The vehicular access will be taken from just before the house to the left of the image. This area is currently used as a site construction compound with some parking. Next slide, please. The last photograph for you today is showing the site when viewed from the undesignated farm road to the north. You can just make out the Harris fencing, which shows the extent of the site. There will be a footpath connection to the site from the approximate location of this photograph. Next slide, please. Thank you, convener. That now concludes the presentation for this application, and we return to the proposed site plan for members.
Thank you, Mr. Panton. Are there any questions on this item? Councillor Richard Waters.
Thank you, convener. Just wanted to ask, just for initially a quick explanation on item 71 of the paper under natural heritage and biodiversity with the trees. It mentions that there's 31 trees in category B and 227 trees in total. Can I just get an explanation of what the categories mean?
I'll take that, if that's okay. There's various categorisations in terms of the quality standard, age, health, etc. related to trees, and they go from A, B, C. So it's different types of quality of trees, similar to what you might see in terms of listed buildings, category A, B, C, depending on their quality. Sorry, just
Elaborate on that.
Sorry, convener, for those
of that, sorry, you probably didn't hear. There was some
sorry, for those of us online, we didn't hear that part there. So I missed the question, I'm afraid.
Do you have anything to add in relation to my explanation on tree categorisation?
No, nothing further to add from Mr. Smith, thanks.
What if it's saying there's 31 trees in category B? What is category B? Is that the trees in good condition? Is it large trees, small trees? What?
I'd have to go to get you the exact definition from the tree report, which will be online. I can do that, but it'll maybe take 5 minutes to go through that and give you the exact definition. But it's trees in reasonable condition, but not the best quality or the longest life. There are various details that set out why it would be categorised in condition B. But in order to give you a full and accurate answer to that, I'd have to go to the nationally accepted definition to explain that to you.
No, that's really what I was looking for, and I assume category A is the highest quality of trees. Regarding item 70, it says where there's a loss of woodland and trees, their compensatory planting will be required. Can I just ask what the compensatory planting for the loss of these trees will be within the development? Thank you.
Yes, I can answer that one for you, Councillor Waters. So on the site plan before you, you'll see there are some trees proposed. However, we will require further details of all the trees to be planted. So we've recommended condition 3 on the permission, and condition 3 requires a landscaping scheme. And as part of that condition, they will need to provide full details of all the compensatory planting on the site for us to agree as a council.
Great, thank you very much for that.
Right, thank you. Councillor Cuthbert, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, convener. It's to do with the play park. Variously, it's described as a play area, play park, and so on. The condition seems to talk about the play area, but it doesn't seem to define the play park and the design of it. I was wondering whether plans have been submitted for that. I couldn't see anything for the play park. I was just wondering what was happening.
Yes, I can answer that. Thank you. We do have plans for the play park. It is a play park rather than a play area. And the condition that's recommended on the permission will ensure the implementation of that play park.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Williamson.
Thank you, convener. My question is related to page 50, the consultations. I noticed the NHS Tayside haven't been consulted, or were they consulted and not mentioned?
I can answer that one for you. Thank you. We don't generally consult NHS Tayside on planning applications. They're consulted as part of the local development plan process, but they're not generally consulted unless it's specifically required for a planning application. So they weren't consulted in this instance because there was no requirement to do so.
Mr. Smith, you got something to add?
Yeah, maybe just clarify that. I think in this situation, it is an LDP allocated site. So NHS Tayside would have been consulted in relation to the preparation of the development plan, and as I understand it, raised no concerns. So there's no locus to reconsult on something they've already accepted the principle of. And also noting that this is effectively a remix of a previously approved scheme. So there's an extant consent, as Mr. Panton explained earlier. So no requirement to consult with NHS Tayside on this application, which already has consent for a similar number of units dating back a number of years and an allocation in the local development plan.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see there's no further questions on this application. Can I ask for a motion? Councillor Braun, you want to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I'll just move the paper as it is. Thank you.
And seconder, Councillor James. You want to speak to it, Councillor James?
Not particularly, Convener, just very happy to second it. It's been before us before, so yeah, happy to second. Thank you.
I see that Councillor Cuthbert, you have a comment on the application.
Yeah, it's to do with the play park again. Condition 5 refers to a play area. I would suggest I would prefer to see that saying play park, because that defines it as a park rather than just an area that's for play.
Thank you for that. I think that will be included.
I'm not sure what difference it makes in terms of the wording. It seems exactly the same thing. There's no difference in definition formally in relation to either. I think the condition's quite clear as to what it relates to and the details that are required and the details before us. I'm a bit unsure as to why we would change the word from one thing to another.
Sorry, just to clarify, my understanding is a play area is an area where play can take place, whereas a play park is a place for equipment provided for people to play on.
I appreciate that may be how you would define it, but I don't think there's any formal definition that relates to that. I don't believe that there's any confusion and resulting from the current wording, or if any change in any real way would occur by changing the word. If the committee wishes us to change that word from one to the other, that be done, but I don't think it would make any difference to the outcome of the condition.
That would certainly be helpful with that. Thank you. Right, thank you. Can we move on to the next application? Next application is 2200142 AMM, approval of matters specified in conditions of permission 16/01348/IPM, erection of 45 dwelling houses, 3 garages and associated infrastructure with a revised design, land 150 metres south west of Doby's Garden Centre, East Hunting Tower, Perth. And I hope that Mr. Panton is going to introduce this report.
Yes, correct. Thank you, Convener. So if we could just move to the next slide, please. So sorry, the other way. That's the one. Yes, so thank you. As you've said, the second item on the agenda today is an approval of matters application for the erection of 45 dwelling houses, 3 garages and associated works on land to the southwest of Doby's Garden Centre, Perth. The site is known as the Barrett Homes Hunting Tower development. Similar to the last application, there have been no public objections to the proposed development, and the application is only before you today as it constitutes a major development. The application seeks a substitution of house types and a very minor change to the layout for Phase 5 of Planning Permission 18/038/FLM. This first slide shows that, sorry, if we could go back a slide, please. Thank you. This first slide shows the location of the proposed development. As seen, this site is to the west of the A9 bypass, with access being obtained via the existing access onto the A85 Creef Road. The site is contained within the existing Barrett Homes development on the site of the former Perth Mart. Next slide, please. This next slide shows the location plan in greater detail. This plan better shows the location of the proposed development within the wider Barrett site. The large building to the immediate right of the site is Doby's Garden Centre, and the 2 buildings within the site to the north are the Travel Lodge and the Glover Arms restaurant. Next slide, please. This next slide shows the Barrett site as a whole. Phase 5 on this plan is the phase before you for assessment today. Phase 5 is approximately 1.93 hectares and is located to the left of the plan. You can see from this plan how the phase will relate to the wider already consented development. No alterations to the other phases are proposed as part of this current application. The other 4 phases are now nearing completion. Next slide, please. This next slide shows the proposed site plan for Phase 5 in greater detail. As seen, the layout is broadly reflective of the wider consented development. There will only be one vehicular access, and this will connect into the current Phase 4, which will then lead to the existing A85 Creef Road signalised junction. To the north of Phase 5, you will see there's a landscape buffer between Phase 5 and the southern sections of Phases 4 and 2. I will now move to a series of photographs showing the site in its present state. This first photograph is taken from the rear of the Travel Lodge looking south towards the already consented Phase 2. Phase 5 will be located beyond Phase 2 towards the tree belt you can just make out in the far distance. Next slide, please. This next photograph shows part of Phase 4 on the right. To the left of the image, the fenced off area will be where the central park will be located. The terraced housing you can just make out in the background is part of the completed Phase 2 section. Next slide, please. This image is again Phase 4, and the road sloping upwards will be the road that leads through Phase 4 to connect Phase 5, which is before you today. Next slide, please. This photograph shows the area which will become the landscape buffer between the existing phases and Phase 5. As seen, it is relatively sloped, sloping upwards towards where Phase 5 will be located. Next slide, please. This photograph is similar to the last one and shows the area of the landscape buffer. However, this time includes more of the land to the right, which will be where Phase 5 is to be located. Next slide, please. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes the presentation for this application. I will leave members with the proposed site plan again.
Thank you, Mr. Panton. I see there's already a question in for Mr. Panton. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Mr. Panton, for your report. I just wanted to pick up on the junction with the A85 and the traffic issues, and I appreciate this is part of a larger development and which has already been consented. My own experience of that junction is such that there are already quite substantial delays on the A85 and indeed people emerging from the housing estate. And I just wondered, with the addition of these this further development and the traffic that goes with that, I note that in the report that there are no concerns flagged up, but I just wondered, are there any plans to monitor the traffic there, and is there any plans to improve the junction and the traffic light sequencing?
Good morning, committee. I'll
Mr. Salmons.
to respond to the question there. In terms of the sort of original permission, the whole site was traffic modelled, and as part of that sort of review, there was conditions required there in terms of the, as you sort of refer to there, the sequencing of traffic lights and the implementation of a MOVA system, which essentially allows various sets of lights to communicate to move traffic more efficiently. As far as I'm aware, those are sort of being discussed and sort of progressed, and will be a sort of ongoing process of adjusting. In terms of future monitoring, obviously during the sort of pandemic and with COVID, things have been very much in flux in the transport world. As such now, our view is we are returning to a new normal, and as such, we are looking to do a model refresh, which I can sort of discuss in more detail, perhaps without the committee, but essentially we will be taking new counts at all major junctions within the Perth city and developing a new model.
That's very helpful, thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor Bob Brown, you've got a question?
Thank you, Convener. It was just a quick question to Mr. Panton on affordable housing. There's very little mention here on that. I'm just wondering, has the affordable housing allocation already been built into the site, or is there some to be included in this phase?
Yeah, I can answer that one. Thank you, Councillor Braun. On that plan that's before you, if you look up to the right, that kind of row of terraced housing, that is phase 2 of the development, and that accounted for the affordable house. Sorry, if we just go back, that's green there, yes. The affordable housing for the whole site has already been completed, so there is no requirement for affordable housing for this section because it's already been delivered.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williamson, you have a question?
Thank you, Convener. Can you hear me okay? Yes. My question is about developer contributions, and the report identifies that it is future-proof. Does that mean that we're going to receive the funding once the development's been completed in its entirety, or is it a drip feed?
I can answer that one. Thank you for your question. So at the original approval, there was a Section 75 legal agreement put in place, which secures contributions from all units on the site. That legal agreement was future-proofed at the time to account for applications such as this to modify it. So there is already a Section 75 legal agreement in place, which means that the council can secure those contributions effectively.
Can I come back? The report identifies there's going to be a contribution to a pedestrian footbridge across the A9. I understand that these contributions, when they're paid, there's a time limit on them being spent. Are we comfortable that the money can be actually spent within that time frame?
Yeah, again, I can answer that one. So with regards to the footbridge, that's actually Transport Scotland that are requesting that contribution rather than Perth and Kinross Council, and there's a condition that attached to the permission to reflect that. So the kind of implementation of that would be in the hands of Transport Scotland rather than Perth and Kinross Council.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, sorry, Mr. Smith wants to clarify more on that question.
Yeah, I think maybe just to clarify that the planning authority and the planning permission don't deliver the contribution requirement or the physical elements. We just secure the funding, which is then passed over to the body that's responsible for delivering the piece of infrastructure. So we can't comment on or give you any guarantees on what will happen because we don't have the responsibility. All we're doing is securing the facility to deliver the piece of infrastructure as part of possibly a larger project.
Okay, thank you. I see there's no more further questions on this application. Can I ask for a motion for this? Councillor James, you've put forward the motion. You want to speak to it?
Only in as much to propose that we accept this this change to the plan. Essentially, this is a nice development, actually, right at the edge of my ward, and I'm sure my fellow councillor McLaren would probably want to second this. But yeah, nice to see it come forward.
Councillor Braun, I say you. Well, okay. Councillor McLaren, seeing that it's your ward, so you want to second it. You want to speak to it?
Thank you. I would happily second this, being a fellow ward councillor with Ian, and I concur with his statement. It is a nice development, and you know, it's contributed well towards affordable housing within Perthshire as well. So happy to second this application.
Thank you. Right, we move swiftly on to item 3. Item 3 is 21/01673 / relocation of a driving range, erection of a golf academy, building and shop, formation of car park. Oh, sorry, I just apologise. Yep. I'll start that again. Item 3 is 21/01673 / relocation of a driving range, erection of a golf academy building and shop, formation of parking area, part diversion of a core path, landscaping and associated works. This is for Murray's Hall House Hotel, Murray's Hall, Perth. And to introduce the report, can I ask Christian Smith to speak?
Thank you, convener. So this application, as we say, relates to the formation of a driving range and related facilities at Murray's Hall Hotel. I'll give you an overview of the proposal and the surrounding context. We move to the first slide, please. So firstly, to identify the context of the site and surroundings, this aerial photograph shows the location of the proposed driving range southwest of Murray's Hall Hotel. The Hotel Drive from Murray's Hall Road forms the northern boundary of the application site, and Murray's Hall Road itself forms the western boundary. There's an existing access track which forms part of the eastern boundary of the application site, linked to the Hotel Drive with the existing driving range at the other end, which can be seen to the southeast of the application site. There are a group of trees extending in a southeasterly direction from Murray's Hall Road. This identifies the position of the path right way, which is supposed to be diverted as part of this proposal under separate legislation. Next slide, please. Hopefully everyone can hear me properly. So here we see a plan that shows the location of the proposed driving range with the location of the existing driving range immediately adjacent in blue, the application site in red. The wider blue outline is the wider grounds of Murray's Hall Hotel and golf course set. Next slide, please. Here we see the proposed layout of the site, showing the driving range outfield area where a cut and fill operation is proposed, the golf academy and driving range bays, together with the Suds Pond and associated car park. The existing Hotel Drive is located to the north of the site, with the existing driving range located southeast, which is proposed to be replaced. The proposed diverted core path and right of way is indicated crossing the site with the brown dotted line on the path plan. Next slide, please. Here we see the existing line of the core path and right of way, which extends across the proposed outfield area marked by the dotted red line. Next slide, please. Here again, we clarify the proposal to divert the existing right of way and core path, which rather than continuing across the proposed outfield area is proposed to run along the edge of the site, the rear north of the range building and proposed car park. As explained in the committee report before you, the proposal to divert the core path and right of way requires a separate diversion order under section 208 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act. The red dots represent the approximate location of signage to inform members of the public of the proposed diversion and to ensure the public do not walk across the outfield area for health and safety reasons. Next slide, please. Here we see a set of elevations for the 15-bay driving range building, which extends to a length of 69 metres. At the northeast corner of the building, a pro shop and changing facilities. I'll start on this slide again. Here we see a set of elevations for the 15-bay driving range building, which extends to a length of 69 metres. At the northeast corner of the building, a pro shop and changing facilities are proposed. The building is proposed to be approximately 4 metres in height with a monopitch roof. It's proposed to be finished in a metal profiled sheeting. Next slide, please. Here we see a set of visualizations which help to detail the design of the proposed driving range building set against the existing backdrop of trees to the north. Next slide, please. We now move to a number of photographs, and this photograph is taken from the eastern side of the application site, looking down towards the proposed driving range. The car park and driving range building are proposed centrally within the photo, adjacent to the existing tree line. The access track in the foreground form part of the existing access between the hotel drive and the existing driving range. Members will note a gap in the grass between the two timber poles. This is the location of the existing core path and right of way, which runs approximately east-west across the site. This is the route which is proposed to be diverted along the existing track and along a newly formed path to the rear or north of the car park and driving range building. The existing driving range site is located behind the picture taker, further along the access track to the east. Next slide, please. This photo shows the existing driving range building and outfield and is looking westwards towards the application site, which is located to the right-hand side of the photo, where the topography dips from east to west. The track which links the hotel drive with the driving range is located to the right, just off picture. The driving range is proposed to be closed once the new range has been completed, should planning permission be granted. Next slide, please. This photo shows and has been taken on the approximate position of the driving range building, and in the foreground shows the location of the proposed car parking area looking back towards the existing track, which links the main hotel drive to the existing driving range. The trees to the left form the northern boundary of the site. The track is located where the parked car is located in the middle of the picture and extends to the right up the hill towards the existing driving range. Next slide, please. This photo is taken looking westwards along the existing hotel access drive towards the gatehouse, and the trees on the left-hand side of the picture represent the north boundary of the application site. Next slide, please. This photo is taken looking down Murray Hall Road with the western boundary of the application site located on the left side of the photo. The entrance point to the core path and right of way is located towards the bottom of this road in the picture. Next slide, please. This photo is taken from the south of the application site and shows the location of the proposed outfield area looking north. The proposed driving range building is to be located centrally on the photo next to the existing tree line in the far the distance which is to be retained. Next slide, please. This final photo provides a wider view of the site from the east above the existing access track and looking westwards. The car park and driving range building are proposed on the right-hand side of the photo next to the existing tree line, and this is also where the existing footpath and right-of-way is proposed to be diverted. The proposed outfield area extends centrally from the driving range building location to the middle of the photo. The group of trees in the middle of shot show the approximate location of the existing core path across the site, which is proposed for diversion. The suds pond is to be located beyond this in the middle of the picture. Thank you, convener. That now concludes the presentation for the application, and we return to the satellite image. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Now, we do have deputations on this application. We have a deputation from the applicant and the agent. Audrey, do we have Mr. Silcock and Ms. Shaw online? Oh, they're in the chamber. Do apologise, they're in the chamber. If you want to come forward, the deputy convener will give you instructions on how this proceeds.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Are you wanting to proceed with your deputation? You'll have 10 minutes. After 9 minutes, I'll give you a warning, give you a minute to summarise. If you'd like to proceed, thank you.
Is that okay? Around here. Gary Silcock, I'm the general manager of Murray's Hall. Just to give you a quick outline of where Murray's Hall is. So Murray's Hall was purchased just about 6 years ago by Stellar Asset Management, and they've taken it on a journey of investment to try and expand what Murray's Hall is currently and make it into a successful business and property for the people of Scone and Perth. Probably 3.5 years ago, we had a £2.5 million investment in the main hotel. We've carried on investing through COVID, through with personnel and also the property. Just probably 6 weeks ago, our restaurant Olas, which was rebranded, managed to gain a second rosette. So one of 6 restaurants now in Perth that has 2 rosettes. We've carried on through COVID and through the last couple of years investing in the golf course, so the membership are getting a better facility, and there's more investment with that golf product there. With the driving range, the current driving range is positioned probably in the worst position that you can position a driving range for the hotel and the golf course. It's probably a 5-minute drive from the pro shop, which means you have to come out of the estate, drive around the estate to go to the driving range, to then get back in your car to go back to the pro shop to then play your golf. The other thing where it's now positioned, it sits on the very top of the hill overlooking Scone, and it looks fantastic in the winter when the lights are on. So lots of light pollution from that site. What we are looking to do is to look at the guest journey for that driving range, and the proposition would be that from the pro shop we would like the golfer to walk down to the proposed position, hit his golf balls, take his golf lesson, look at the golf shop, and then from there start from the first tee, which is currently the 9th tee. And then at the end of the round, they would finish back up at the hotel. The position of the driving range would obviously make the pro shop busier. The facility would give us a greater chance to grow our membership, which would obviously help the golf course by investing in a driving range where you can actually see the golf ball land, where the current one you can't. After about 150 yards. You can't see the golf ball, so if you were a golfer, there's not much practice benefit from that. You're just hitting it out into no man's land. So by creating a better practice experience, we would also look at investing in the latest technology, either TrackMan or Top Tracer, which would then open up golf to a wider community, because it's not just about golf. It becomes more of a computer game environment. So that brings more people into the golf, which means we can benefit not just our main golf course, but our 9-hole golf course as well. By doing that, it means that we can have our business open for longer. It means that we won't be, the business wouldn't be negative in the winter months because people would be practicing because the facility's better. So that allows me to look at having more staff, because you've got longer hours. Busier facility means that hopefully we'll have more members. More members, busier staff means a busier hotel, food and beverage outlet. So all in all, it would be a big enhancement, and it would be the next part of our investment as Murray's Hall to expanding the Murray's Hall Country Estate. I'll let Ailey carry on now with the technical detail.
Thank you. Good morning. Driving range proposals existing Murray's Hall business for the inclusion of a golf academy, an associated shop within a dedicated golfing area in the estate. The redevelopment of the driving range is key to the short-term business plan for the hotel. The driving range application is separate to the previous master plan, which has now been withdrawn. The master plan has been reconsidered by our client, and the driving range is a separate application so that this facility can be delivered in a timely manner. With regards to the economic benefits, the relocation of the driving range will mean the range is busier, which will increase staffing, and the new technology will mean that it will be used in the way greater guest engagement. The repositioning of the golf shop will increase trade, increasing membership for golf, creating demand for extra golf lessons, and encouraging more golfers to the game. The proposals will add up to 4 full-time equivalent staff members and may also assist in adding further staffing levels within the golf course and the food and beverage areas within the hotel. The proposals improve the existing golf offering at Murray's Hall, which are a well-established existing business and tourism facility, so the proposals therefore comply with Greenbelt policies. As already discussed, the proposals include the realignment of a core path and right-of-way. The core path will be realigned at the end of the existing track around the north of the proposed driving range buildings. The proposals will only impact a small section of the route, which currently comprises undefined field paths. Users will benefit from a more defined route with only a minimal increase in the distance of approximately 100 metres. The changes to the core path will also be subject to a separate formal process for stopping up and diversion. With regards to transport, there will be 18 parking spaces provided to serve the new 17-bay driving range. With regards to traffic generation, the projected peak time uplift between the existing driving range and the proposed driving range is 3 trips. The existing range will close, and its relocation will shift driving range traffic away from the existing vehicular access entrance on the minor road to the south onto the better provided Murray's Hall Road. Traffic generation, car parking and access are all considered acceptable by the Council's Transport Planning Department. A lighting strategy for the driving range has been submitted in support of the application and has been accepted by the Council's Environmental Health team. Due to the topography, the tree cover for the new driving range, the impact from the flood lighting will be less than the existing driving range, which is more prominent, more visible, and has a less sophisticated lighting arrangement. With regards to trees, an arboricultural impact assessment has been submitted in support of the application. 1 tree is to be felled due to ash dieback, and 3 others are proposed for removal due to health and safety concerns. An ecological assessment has also been submitted in support of the applications, and the findings have been accepted by the Council's Biodiversity Officer. The assessment confirms the proposals will result in the loss of low-level, semi-natural habitat. There will be a negligible impact on biodiversity, and there will be no impact on protected species. A drainage strategy and flood risk assessment has also been submitted in support of the application and has been accepted by the Council. The proposals include a sustainable urban drainage system and a suds pond proposed to the west of the driving range. With regards to the site area and the type of application, the total area proposed for development is 1.69 hectares, so the proposals do not reach the 2 hectare threshold for a major development. The application is therefore considered to be a local development. As previously mentioned, the existing driving range will cease to operate once the new driving range is opened. Existing buildings will be repurposed for ancillary storage and the outfield will be returned to managed grassland. In summary, the proposals represent a significant investment by the owners of Murray's Hall Hotel. The proposals will create a more accessible and fit for purpose facility, which will also result in additional job creation.
Thank you both for your deputation. We're going to open it up to questions for the committee. Are you okay for answering questions? Yes. I see we've got a question from Councillor Williamson.
Yes, it was about the moving of the core footpath to around the back of the driving range in itself. So my question was, my understanding under the rights of Rome, you can actually walk across the golf driving range, and I was wondering if you were considering introducing greater separation between the core footpath and the driving range through hedging plants. So.
The core path will include new surfaces. There will be a new wire and post fence and also beach hedging. And there will also be signposting. So there will be more physical separation between the two and directional signage to direct people along the appropriate route and make sure that people don't stray into the outfield.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ingleworth, you've got a question?
Can you tell me how many people are employed at the moment by the Murray's Hall business?
It was 87 last month.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Anderson, I see you've got a comment. Can we maybe have to leave comments till the end? Thank you. We have no more questions for yourselves. You're free to go. Thank you. Right now, can we move on to questions for officers on this application? Any questions for the officers? Oh, I see Councillor Drysdale, you have a question for the officers.
Thank you, convener. I wonder if the slides can go back to the ordnance survey map that illustrates the core path and the proposed diversion to the core path. First of all, the previous one that you just had a minute ago would be good. Can you just clarify for me on that illustration there where the new core path is, because I can't quite see it.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Drysdale. Actually, if we move to the previous slide and you bear in mind what you see in front of you there. So the existing core path is in the red dotted line going right across in front of where the driving range building would be. The diversion is the yellow line, which would divert it down round where the car park would be, the back of the building, and then back up to its existing exit point, which is marked at either 1 or 2 on that plan.
Okay, in that case, can we go back to the next slide again, please? Now that I see that. it strikes me that what is going to be the consequence of that is that the gradient of the core path is substantially steeper, given the contours that I'm seeing there. Am I right in that? Is that a fair assessment of the impact of this change?
That's not my reading of it. I think the core path at the minute has gradient to it, and the diversion would also have gradient to it. The difference is not significant. We have consulted with our green space colleagues who are comfortable with the principle of it, and the process would require to be gone through under section 208 to confirm any diversion, and obviously details would be looked at in terms of the appropriateness under that legislation at the time.
Thank you. Follow up, if I may. Can you just clarify again for me what the process is around section 208 of the Planning Act and how approval is gained? Obviously, that's going to be a condition of the consent, but just for my information.
Maybe to clarify, it's not a condition of the consent that section 208 is completed. That is a separate legislative process. We're simply pointing out that that process is required to be undertaken. I'd maybe defer to my colleague Jeff to explain the detail of that process, but in effect an order would have to be applied for, that would have to be considered. There's consultations undertaken, it's notified to the public, people can comment on that. If they object to it, then a hearing would be held. That hearing would determine whether or not the order was able to be accepted or not, and at the end of the outcome of that, it's either approved or not, and then implemented or not.
Yes, convener. I'm going to admit that the committee would have been better served had my colleague Colin Elliott been here this morning instead of me, because he's much more conversant with that core path stopping up and diversion process, because I have asked him to deal with that on a number of occasions over the last 4 years. It is something the council is familiar with because we promoted core path diversions in relation to Blackbird to facilitate I think a Highland Spring development or network rail changes. We also promoted core path diversions and stopping up in relation to the Crosstail Link Road earlier this year. It's a static process that's gone through where intimation is served. There's the right given to parties to oppose it if they wish, and I believe the application has to be referred to the Scottish Government and the Department for Planning and Environmental Appeals, who will appoint a reporter and may or may not choose to have a hearing in the event that there is opposition to it. So, as I say, it is something we've done at least 3 occasions in the last 5 years, and it is a process that follows after the granting of planning permission, but is also required to allow the development to proceed.
Thank you for those answers.
Thanks again. Just a quick follow-up in my follow-up. Right. So if I understand what you've just said there, Mr. Fogg, that if we grant planning permission today, and then hypothetically the removal, the redirection of the core path is not approved under section 208 of the Planning Act, what is the impact of that on the ability to proceed with this this project?
Essentially, my view is that it couldn't proceed. They would need both consents to be in place, and there's a condition imposed here, which effectively I think couldn't be complied with, but for the securing of the core path diversion. So that's the further protection.
Thank you. Councillor Braun, you have a question.
Thank you, Convener. It's probably a question for Mr. Salmon, I think. Closing the existing driving range and therefore the traffic that uses the U85, I think it is, that traffic would then come back onto the Morris Hall Road. Do we have any reservations about the volume of traffic using that road? The driving range was in place.
Yes, indeed, road safety were consulted in relation to the proposals and offered no objection. In terms of the amount of traffic likely to be generated, it is very small. We're looking at single digits up to potentially 7 vehicles during peak hours. So that impact is not thought to be of any significance on the route.
Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. I see there's no more questions in the chat. Can I ask for a motion for this? Oh, I do apologise. Councillor Anderson, you wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, I remember this area quite well. It was in my ward when I was councillor for Scoon for many years going back. And the element of light pollution when the first driving range was constructed, the lighting pollution in the evening was quite a major comment within the area of Scoon. Actually, those that could see it quite clearly from their abode. The new location of it removes that polluted element, and it would be in this location. It's probably, I've driven on the old driving range and I thought I was doing well when I got the ball running down the hill. It'll be slightly more difficult to play as well in future if this is approved today. The ground is probably rising slightly in front of you when you drive off. But in essence, I'm quite very happy with this proposal. The one concern I have, but that's being covered today, is with the moon of the right of way, the aeration of the core path. I've been involved in these things in the past myself. I say the last one I moved was top of Highfield Road, which has been retained, I think, that development, new developments there. And having been a member of the core path local access forum for the past 20 odd years, I was surprised that it was not referred to the access forum. You go to Greenpeace or Green Space, it's called, but no mention of the local access forum for comments. I understand the local community council has been up and visited the site, and with no adverse comments directly on the proposal. So I think we haven't got to proposing it yet, but I would lend my support as a seconder if it gets that far. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I see in the chat that Councillor James, you want to bring forward the motion. You want to speak to it?
Thanks very much, Convener. Yeah, I'm not a golfer, but I am a supporter of business. I think the options they brought forward here are really sensible. I like the way they've actually engaged with the team for the core path. They're always a contentious issue. My only concern will be that you have to have an alternative route in place to be able to divert the other route anyway. So I'm certainly in favour of this, and I'd wish them well.
Thank you. And we have a seconder, Councillor Rollingworth.
Councillor Anderson would like to second.
Okay, no problem. Councillor Anderson.
I would like to second it as a local member. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Right, we move on to the next item of business. It's renewal. It's the plan. Try that again. It's application 21/02187/IPL. Renewal of permission 18/01855/IPL. Residential development land 100 metres north of Schiehallion, Crook of Devon. And oh yes, I do apologise, Councillor Leishman.
Thank you, Convener. This application seeks to renew planning permission. Sorry.
Yeah, Paul, just hold on a second there. And we'll let you know when Councillor Leishman's back in the chambers and we can proceed.
Apologies.
Convener, just as a matter of interest, as 522 and 523 are related, is it possible we should discuss these together and then separate them back out when it comes to a decision? I think this was a policy we adopted regularly previously. Mr. Smith's shaking his head, but it was something we did in the past. But we heard them together and effectively separated them out on decision making. But others may wish to comment on that. So I'll open up for clarification. Sorry.
Does anyone have a comment on that, as I wasn't, and Mr. Fogger's comment?
Mr. Smith might want to come in, but I think on this occasion, Councillor Braun, there might be benefits in having this one proved and out the way, because they're slightly different. This is the extension of the existing IPL permission, and I think on balance it'd be helpful to have that sorted before continuing to look at the separate item. It's not, I'm not aware of the deputations, Danny. No. No, there's not as if we've got deputation.
Right, thank you. Right, I believe it's Mr. Williamson who is going to speak to this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. This application seeks to renew planning permission for a residential development on land to the northwest of Schiehallion within the settlement boundary of Crook of Devon. The original planning permission in principle for this site was approved in 2015 with a subsequent renewal in 2018. In light of COVID legislation, the current permission in principle would otherwise expire at the end of September 2022, and this application seeks to renew the overarching planning permission in principle for a further 3-year period, hence the applicant's desire to keep the permission live in this instance. Move on to the next slide, please. This aerial extract shows the location of the site towards the northern edge of Crook of Devon, adjacent to the Millennium footpath, leading out of the settlement past the 9 acres scout camp. Next slide, please. Oh, it seems to have jumped a few. Yep, perfect. This illustrates in greater detail the pattern of development and geographical features to the north of Fossaway Primary School and adjacent to the River Devon. It also shows the layout of and pattern of existing housing within the wider area. I will now move on to a selection of recent photos which shall show the various elements of the proposal I have described. Next slide, please. This first photo shows the recently completed dwelling Thistle Meadow at the corner of the road leading from Fossaway Primary, with the Millennium footpath extending beyond and shared road. This is approximately 75 metres east of the application site and gives a flavour for recently approved development in the area. Next photo, please. This next photo shows the shared access track and Millennium footpath which leads to the 9 acre scout camp beyond the application site, which is a short distance on the left-hand side. Next photo, please. This photo is taken from the northern boundary of the site, looking south towards the bank of trees alongside the River Devon. It also shows the relatively unkempt and overgrown appearance of the site at present. Next photo, please. We next look in a westerly direction from the northern boundary towards the adjacent 9 acre scout camp, with intervening trees cover in between. Next photo, please. Here we see the relationship with the existing property towards the eastern boundary of the site, with Careen Cottage to the left and Devon House and Beach House directly ahead amongst the trees. Next photo, please. This last photo looks northwest from the site to Lendrick Hill, which sits to the north of Yetts and Muckert. Thank you, Convener. We now conclude the presentation and we return to the site location plan.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this application from councillors? No questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Waters.
Apologies, Convener. I thought I'd put that in. Just regarding the application that came through previously that this committee refused, one of the report that then went to appeal with the Scottish Government, one of the reporters' issues with it was the idea of infill, given that it's the edge of the settlement that is between the last houses on that creek and the edge of the settlement. Can I just ask for a wee bit of explanation on the policy that fits in with?
Just to answer in respect of that, the application which was considered in 2019 was an application for basically matters specified in conditions. So that obviously went into the specifics of the siting, design and layout of the proposal. Now, the application that we are considering in this instance is the in principle overarching application. So I think the comments that you've raised there, Councillor Waters, might be best analysed against the subsequent application. On the agenda, what we have to do in this instance, in the case of a renewal application, we have to take cognizance of the fact that there is already an overarching planning permission in principle. The site is located within the settlement boundary of Crook of Devon, and as such it's assessed against the relevant policies in that regard. But just in respect of the reporter's comments at that previous application, it didn't rule out the principle of developing the site at all. It was more about the specifics of the siting, layout and character of it. But as I say, we can address that at the subsequent application on today's agenda.
Thanks. I'm quite happy to take it at the next application. I think it is relevant for this as well, for the idea in principle what you can deliver in principle in relation to what infill is. But more than happy to wait for the next application to discuss it more fully.
Mr. Smith's got a little bit more information on this.
Yeah, maybe just to clarify, I think what you're commenting on is the application that proposed a detailed layout for the site, following on from the previous approval of the in principle. This application itself details no indication whatsoever on what would happen on the site, so we can't assess it against the placemaking policies that would determine whether or not the layout is appropriate in terms of the place. So I think Mr. Williamson is directing you perhaps to consider the layout of the proposal in the subsequent application, which is markedly different from that one that you're referring to as well, and we'll discuss that in the previous the report to come.
More than happy. I'll still stick with my, the idea of how infill fits in with that in principle application still stands, I think. But it may be easier when you've got something firmly there to chat about it more detail relating to a specific application. More than happy to wait for the next one. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. I don't see any more questions in the chat. Can I ask members for a motion for this application, please? Councillor Richard Waters, you've brought forward a motion. Do you wish to speak to it?
Just briefly, but I think it does sit within the settlement, and I think the principal idea that you can extend on the road houses along to the edge of the settlement, I think is absolutely valid. So I'm more than happy to approve the application and the recommendation of officers on this paper. Thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Cuthbert, you're seconding the motion. You want to speak to it?
Just very briefly, just to say that as Councillor Waters has said, it's in the settlement boundary. I can see no issue. It is developable land, so I would put it forward for approval.
Right, thank you for that. We can swiftly move on to the next item, which is 523. It's 21/02133/AML, which is the erection of 10 dwelling houses, 6 garages and associated works, approval of matters specified in conditions of 18/01855/IPL, land to the west of Inverdowie, Crook of Devon. And I believe it's Mr. Williamson who is speaking to this report.
Thank you again, convener. Following on from the previous application on the agenda, this application seeks the approval of matters specified in conditions relating to the extant planning permission and principle for the site. In particular, it seeks permission for the erection of 10 dwelling house, 6 with detached garages comprising of 7 different house types. This application follows a previous refusal in 2019 and subsequent appeal to the Scottish Government, which was also dismissed. Next slide, please. And apologies if members have a feeling of deja vu, but this aerial extract again shows the location of the site towards the northern edge of Crook of Devon. Next slide, please. Again, this slide shows the current pattern of development and features to the north of Fossaway Primary School and the adjacent River Devon. Next slide, please. You'll be glad to see that this slide shows a great more detail and change from the previous application. This shows the intended layout, and in comparison to the previous layout considered in 2019, this location has sought to address the criticisms of the Development Management Committee and the appointed reporter of the Scottish Government. In particular, the layout has been amended and has altered the positioning and orientation of dwellings, with an inward-facing emphasis together with a mix in scale and design of the proposed dwellings to basically give a flavour for the range and scale of properties which surround the application site. Access to the site would be taken from a single point to the north, with the 10 plots accessed internally from either of the 2 cul-de-sacs. Next slide, please. This slide is a 3D perspective illustration of how the development would look, with an indication of the scale and external finishing materials, which include slate-clad roofs, mixes of stone or off-white render, or large cladding to the walls. It also gives an indication of the wooded setting of the site. Next slide, please. This last slide illustrates in greater detail the general scale of one of the proposed dwellings, with this example being of 4 bedrooms with an attached garage. If necessary, I can now move on to a selection of recent photos, although these are identical to those shown for the previous application. Next slide, please. Again, this just gives an indication of what that new house type is like at Thistle Meadow at the corner of the road from the primary school. Next photo, please. This just shows the access track leading up towards the site and the 9 acre scout camp beyond. Next slide, please. This photo is taken from the northern boundary of the site, looking inwards with the bank of trees alongside the River Devon. Next photo, please. This was again looking towards the west of the site, towards the scout camp with the intervening tree cover. Next photo, please. Importantly, this is showing the relationship at the eastern boundary of the site with Careen Cottage on the left and Devon House and Beach House directly ahead. Next photo, please. And this last photo looks northwest from the site to Lendrick Hill, which sits to the north of Yetzer-Muckert and shows the intervening and undulating land in between. Thank you, convener. That now concludes the presentation for this application, and we now return to the site location plan.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, for your presentation. Does the committee have any questions for the officers? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, convener. I just refer to Fossaway District Community Council's comments. They object to the proposal, raising their concerns over drainage connections, no affordable housing, traffic increase, road safety, overdevelopment, and worryingly no flood risk assessment. Have the officers any comments on that? Objection?
Who's going to take that?
I'll take that quite happily. In respect of the comments raised by the Community Council, the drainage connection is to the public system. If they are unable to provide that, ultimately it would necessitate a private system, and for that a separate planning application would be required. But from the information that we've had thus far is that there's no problem in securing a connection via Scottish Water. With regard to affordable housing, obviously a development of 10 units, it's exceptionally unlikely that any housing provider or registered social landlord would deliver 2 units on any one site. For management purposes, it needs to be a substantially greater number to ensure its viability. Hence why in this instance it's appropriate to cover it just through commuted sums for developer obligation perspective. In respect of traffic increase and road safety, as members will note from paragraph 26 of the report, there are no objections to the proposals, and conditions can ultimately be used for road widening, track upgrades, and also a construction traffic management plan. And then when it comes to no flood risk assessment, we have had a subsequent response from our flooding team, and the levels between the Devon and the site itself are satisfactory, and that other drainage measures can be controlled by planning condition.
Thank you. Can I just come back, convener?
Yes.
Yeah. The word "if" is very small but big meanings. If the drainage isn't satisfactory, sounds quite as though maybe some more investigative work needs to be done.
No, certainly that wasn't the intention of my delivery. Certainly the information that we've been provided with is satisfactory in that regard. So we would, as standard, condition that proposals be carried out in accordance with the submitted plans. And it's only in a circumstance where something unforeseeable happened that we would need to revisit that via separate applications.
Thank you.
Mr. Salmans, you want to come give a little bit more on the transport side of it?
Yeah, of course. In relation to road safety were consulted again and offered no objection. Some members may recall, in relation to the previous refusal, the specific safety concern that was raised by committee was in relation to the multiple accesses onto the access road. Namely, I believe 3 or 4 properties had driveways that directly accessed it. The design before us seeks to address that, and essentially now we have a sole access to the access road, and all properties essentially are internal in terms of the vehicular access.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Christian, do you want to add anything to this?
I'd maybe just, and I'm trying to get as close to the mic as possible to avoid any issues without eating it. Just to clarify, I think what Councillor Reid had said, the indications are that drainage will be perfectly satisfactory. There is no indication that there will be any problem whatsoever. However, I think what Mr. Williamson was saying is, if something very surprising happens, then and they would require to implement an on-site private system, then that would require planning permission, would need to be considered on its merits, and would likely have implications in terms of the layout. So we would see undoubtedly a separate planning application to develop the site in a different way. But in terms of the proposals before us and the indication from Scottish Water and the detail of the application in itself, the connection can be made to the public system.
Thank you. Mr. Williamson, I see you put an A in the Chat, you want to?
That's correct. It was just to further highlight that condition 13 on page 146 of the papers does require, a further detailed scheme for the SUDS disposal, that sustainable urban drainage system on the site. But the general principles of what had been proposed had been established through the supporting information to this application.
Thank you. Councillor Braun, you have a question?
Thank you, Convener. In several of the objections, there is an off-quoted line, which I think is taken from the original in principle, that any applicant would be optimistic to get 9 houses on this site. On the 10 and the original application, which was used, we're still sitting at 10. I just wondered how we balance back to that comment that you would be optimistic to get 9 houses here. It was in the original in principle, I believe.
I'll just pick that one up if that's okay. Obviously, there are no set capacities identified for this site within the adopted local development plan. At the time of the previous reporter's decision to the 2019 application, it did flag that there would be potential to accommodate residential development on the site. It would just be subject to having the appropriate siting and layout consideration of the character of the area, etc. In this instance, and I think it would probably be beneficial if we could move back to the site layout plan if possible, please. That's perfect, thank you very much. I think as you can see from what's displayed before you in this instance, some thought has gone into the layout of the site, has been supported by a design and planning statement as well. The general density upon the site is representative of a lot of the development which occurs around about the site. There's more than adequate garden grounds associated with the properties in this instance. It's considered that it's in compliance with the placemaking policies and policy 17 of the local development plan. There's also some provision for some more limited areas of shared and communal space within the centre. But ultimately, in respect of the current local development plan, this proposal is considered to be compliant with it and is an acceptable solution. So we have to consider what's before us today, albeit in the knowledge of what has gone before, but certainly the applicant has sought to address many of those concerns which had been raised by the committee and also by the reporter at that previous time, hence the recommendation of approval in this instance.
Thank you. We now have a question from Councillor McLaren.
Thank you. My question is with regard to the road. Could you clarify, is that road a road that's maintained by Perth and Kinross Council, or is it an unadopted road? Just the pictures, it doesn't look, it's a wee bit misleading maybe in the pictures.
So happy to clarify that it is currently a private access. It is not maintained or adopted by PKC.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, you have a question?
I'm just wondering whether the mountain has returned to its original location or not. But one application is northwest of Schiehallion. It's the same site we're talking about. Now we're west of Inner Downey. I'm not sure, has the ownership of the land changed or mountains gone to different areas or whatever? I don't know why there's a different name on the application as such.
I would just highlight that in this instance, it very much kind of comes down to how an application is described by an applicant on the application form. It is the same site. There's no change in ownership as far as I'm concerned. That's all adequately covered within the application form itself. It's just deemed to be whatever identifies the site to a recognisable standard. So apologies if there's any confusion.
Thank you for that. Can we, Councillor Waters, you have a question?
Thank you, convener. Just too quick with that button at times. My question very much relates to the reporter's response to the previous refusal by the council, where I accept within the, or what appears to be within this application as different from the application that was previously refused by this committee. The change in the houses which had driveways going on to the core footpath has changed and are now facing in. The only other real difference I see is we've shuffled houses around just a little bit. We've still created that idea of a street line and then a more urban type development. And I ask officers, am I missing something here, or has there been any other fundamental change that deals with the not only the issues raised by this committee and refusing it initially, but also by the reporter's responses to these issues that were raised? Thank you.
Mr. Smith, you're going to answer that one?
I'll maybe just come in quickly in advance of Mr. Williamson. I appreciate what you're saying and your viewpoint. However, we have slightly different viewpoint and feel that the issues that were raised previously and resulted in the refusal of the application have been adequately addressed, and there's quite significant change in terms of the siting design and layout of the development, and we're now satisfied that the proposals are acceptable. But I'll maybe get Mr. Williamson to provide a bit more detail.
Thank you, Christian. Yeah, certainly from the perspective of the reporter's previous decision notice, and I appreciate that I'm not sharing my screen on this, but this is me reading directly from it. But it had basically flagged concern about the prospects of providing a new building line along the track frontage. Dean Silman's already touched upon this briefly as well. So the applicant has done away with the street frontage towards the northern boundary of the site. So everything now faces internally. In respect of the kind of range of development or dwelling types and sizes, there's now a distinct variety. As I noted, that there's 7 different house types. Previously, there was a lot more uniformity, and there was a consideration by the reporter that it would, as a result and consequence, be very suburban in appearance. So they have stepped away from that and have introduced a mix of material types and palette for the development as well. So those aspects and how it's been orientated within the site and the layout of the plots has been deemed to address those concerns which were raised previously.
Thank you for that.
Can I have a supplementary, please? I know a few times in the presentation you showed can't remember the name of the house, but having walked that road many times delivering leaflets quite recently, it's an individual houses, and there's individual bespoke houses within the whole character, and one of the the policy where one of our objections were that it didn't respect the site rural setting, and I understand that there is an element of planning that can be subjective, but having the 10 houses in a more concentrated area that all have a similarish look to them. You can change little bits to rendering and stuff, but they have a similar bit of look to them. And taking into account the idea that this is part of the infill type idea, is 10 houses not a bit much for that type of the interpretation of that policy? And I don't want to go down and read out all the reporters' thoughts and respect for that, but it still doesn't fit in with the same character as the rest of that area. Walking all the way up from the school along the back route is very bespoke individual houses, and then all of a sudden we're putting similar type houses, very concentrated area. There is a question in here, I think.
Christian, you want to answer that?
I think you've hit the nail on the head in the first part of your commentary there, that it is subjective and officers believe that the proposals are perfectly acceptable and commend them to you. You have your own opinion.
I think more than that, it's got, you know, the infill, the idea of 10 houses is out of character. It does not respect the site rural setting. I want to understand why you believe that now, why officers now believe that it does respect the site rural setting, because it's not similar to the other type of developments that are along that way. And yes, there's one house that has a similar size house and probably a similar type design, but it's an individual house.
Again, just maybe going back to what I'd said previously, that we have looked in great detail at this application. We've gone through the presentation to show that we've looked at the setting and the surroundings, and we feel that the proposals as before us, which are significantly amended from previous proposals that were refused, are acceptable, meet with the council's policies in terms of placemaking, but into that location, although there are 10 and they are of a particular architectural style, but the fact that they are not each different from each other is not an unacceptable aspect and does not fit with that location in its edge of settlement rural location. We feel that it's perfectly acceptable. That is our view, and we commend the report and the development to you.
Thank you. Councillor Cuthbert, you have a question, or a couple of questions, I'm assuming.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I have a number of questions. It depends on the answers as to how many questions there'll be. If I start with the first one, which is to do with the, we were sent a video last night by Mr. Williams Starkey, and that showed water flowing along the road directly outside this site. The thing I found interesting was the water was flowing towards the east, which tends to imply that this site feeds towards Loch Leven rather than the Devon River. I was wondering whether the site was actually in the Loch Leven catchment area.
Who can answer that? Paul?
I'll need to just have a quick check over the Loch Leven catchment area and get my overlays up and running. That does take time to do so, but certainly from the correspondence that we've had from the flooding team, there has been no concerns kind of raised in that regard, and certainly we very much rely upon their expertise on that. I will add that I've not seen the video that has been circulated, but I am aware that Mr. Starkey did submit a valid representation to the application timelessly.
Thank you for that answer. I mean, my question is really more about the Loch Leven catchment, because that implies a whole lot more things that need to be in this application. If it's in the Loch Leven catchment, my view is that it must be if the water is flowing to the east towards Loch Leven. I don't know if we get a definitive on that.
Certainly, that's what I was trying to.
Mr. Williamson's checking our GIS overlays to confirm the Loch Leven catchment. Maybe comment as well that this is connecting to the public system.
That brought me to the next question, which is the question of the Drum sewage wastewater treatment plant, which I understand this site would be feeding into. My understanding from locals is that this wastewater treatment plant is at capacity and is actually exceeding its capacity at the moment, and there therefore isn't any available connections. So I'm just wondering whether or not that is the case, or whether you know of something that's changing at that wastewater treatment plant.
Again, I'll maybe respond to that. As you'll see from the submissions, the consultations and the report, we've consulted with Scottish Water, who are the responsible authority for that facility, who raised no objections, but advised that a connection application will require to be made, and until the connection application is actually made, they cannot confirm the position because they would need to look at that point in time, but they do not object to the proposals or indicate that there are any capacity issues associated to the facility. I appreciate that that may be the understanding of your constituents or local people, but that is not the position of Scottish Water, who are responsible for the facility.
Thank you for that. That's interesting because locals tell me there are outstanding applications that have been told they can't have a connection. So that was the reason for my question. Okay, the next question is about the finish of the buildings. Am I correct in saying that 8 out of 10 of the houses are white or off-white rendered in the development?
Yes, just to confirm that is one of the materials within the palette. There is also elements of larch cladding and also facing stone, which are integrated into them to provide a range of material types and interest within the design. And just in answer to the query over the Lochleven catchment area, the site in essence bounds it. The majority of the site is located out with the catchment area, and only a very small proportion on the eastern boundary is incorporated within the site.
Thank you for that. The next question is to do with plot ratios and the size of the actual plots that have been allocated. Looking at the list of plot ratios that are in the report, I calculate that the surrounding properties have a 0.24 figure, and the development is 0.17, which indicates a 36% higher density than the surrounding plots. I was just wondering if you would agree roughly with that figure.
What I would highlight, and obviously we've just got the site location plan back up on the screen again, but there are a mix and range of property types and densities within the immediate area. Certainly to the southwest of the site there, that you can see that there are some quite large properties within small fews, yet at the same time there are much larger properties within very generous garden grounds at the same time. But in respect to the placemaking policies of the council, and as outlined in paragraph 39 of the report, it's considered that in this instance they are considered acceptable, and they are in line with the placemaking supplementary guidance of the council.
Okay, my next question relates to the high water table that's referred to in the previous application at the same site. That in combination with flooding that we were sent videos of. I'm just concerned there's no flood risk assessment with this application, and I wondered why not.
But certainly the flooding team have been consulted as part of the application proposals, and they ultimately have no objection. But as I highlighted previously, there is a requirement for some further drainage information to be submitted by condition. But obviously we're reliant upon the input and expertise of our colleagues in that regard. But again, I would flag that any circulation of flooding videos has not been circulated to myself within the development management team.
Convener, I'll just maybe direct members to paragraphs 51, 52, 53 and 54 of the report. 51, which is taken from commentary received from structures and flooding colleagues. As we're looking at a site that has a long history here, it would appear from the report that there was a flood risk assessment undertaken and submitted previously, and colleagues in structures and flooding advised that the valid outcomes of that remain, and that there was some minor further calculation work undertaken that they feel is adequate and no requirement for an additional flood risk assessment. 52 then talks about the water table, and 53 requiring a condition, 54 also discussing the wastewater treatment works, etc.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to my questions now because I can't recall if somebody's still asking a question. No, there's no further questions in this application. So can I call for a motion? Was that Councillor James? Is that a motion?
That was a typo. I'm sorry, convener, but I am happy to move the paper if nobody else. In fact, I'll pass over to
Okay, yeah.
Councillor Waters. Sorry.
Thank you, thank you. Councillor Waters, you want to speak to it?
Thank you, convener. I'd like to move a motion for refusal of this application. I don't think this fits in with the same reasons as last time. Basically, that I don't think it contributes at all to the area at all. I think it's very outplaced for the back route and where it is. I do not object, and as in the previous application, object to the idea that there should be houses or there can be housing along this area, as the renewal of the in principle application previously refers. But in relation to this application, I think it does not fit in or respect the other houses within the area. I think all the houses are of a very similar architectural design, where the other houses within the area are all very, very unique and bespoke, and might get a couple of houses that are roughly the same. Doesn't contribute positively to the rural nature of it all. It does urbanise it very much, in the sense that was previously stated as well in the previous one.
Yeah.
Long-standing advice of Scottish Government is that that should ordinarily be a policy basis for a reason, and I heard what you stated there as your proposed motion, but it did stop short of specifying part of the local development plan. It would be preferable. I don't know if you're going to be aided by Councillor Cuthbert. There's a proper expectation. There's a policy basis to support.
Sorry about that. Hopefully you'll be able to help with this, but I think it's basically on the policies 1A, 1B and policy 17 with the interpretation of the infill policy. Apologies.
And you, Councillor Cuthbert, you're seconding the motion.
Thank you, convener. Yes, in principle, just as Councillor Waters has said, what you're doing is putting a wee village on the side of this this area, which is very distinct. It's very separate houses, but every house is different. The density of the site is much greater. It's 36% greater than the surrounding area. So I would say that policy 1A and 1B, policy 17 that are breached, and I would second the motion to refuse.
Thank you. I see we have an amendment from Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, convener. I'm happy to support that we move this proposal. I'm content that the planning department have done their work adequately. I think this is a small development, and I note that we have previously today given permission for developments of a far higher density than this. Crooked Devon has a wide range of different housing styles, and I don't think that this new development will create a great deal of dissonance between those styles.
Do you have a seconder for the amendment? Councillor James.
Sorry, convener. Yeah, as I intimated, I would have been satisfied to have proposed we accept the officer's recommendation. I mean, the developer has gone away, taken cognizance of previous decisions and tried to address them. If our officers, flooding team, Rose team, and everybody else agree with the developers, then I'm happy to agree with our officers. So I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Do members have any comments?
Yes, convener, if I may. It's in there somewhere.
Thank you for that. I believe that some people on the internet didn't hear what your comments were, Councillor Braun. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, convener. What I was trying to say was that if you go through the paperwork when this was previously refused, the core of the argument was that this was an urban development in a rural location. Although the plans have changed, and I accept that, I think the concept is still the same. This is still an urban development in a rural location, and the spirit of the refusal still stands, in my opinion. My two colleagues who have moved a motion to refuse have quoted the policies which were originally raised by this committee. That's policy 1A and policy 17. I think those two reasons still stand at this moment. And I did mention, of course, that there was a third reason we rejected it at that time, which was to do with affordable housing. And whilst I accept that there is a demand for affordable housing in rural areas, I also note that the RSL has said that it's not viable, so we have to accept that. So that was the spirit of my comments there. Hopefully that's it in replay. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you. Can I now ask the proposer to sum up?
Thank you, convener. I think Bob Braun's summed up very well. This site sits within the settlement area. There is an in principle, we've agreed to the in principle that they can develop or put an application forward for housing within this area. No issues at all with that. The design is just shifted around a few houses, dealt with some of the core issue, which relating to the core footpath, and turning 3 of the houses around to face inwards. Apart from that, I'm finding it very difficult to see, very much different from the application that came forward previously before this committee. So I feel it refusal with this, and to ask the applicant to reconsider and bring something forward that's more suitable for this area of Brook of Heaven. That fits in with the existing housing and existing area as it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I now ask for the proposer of the amendment to sum up?
I'll just be brief. I'm content that the planning department have done their job properly and made a correct recommendation.
Thank you. I'll now hand over to Mr. Fogg to confirm the terms of the motion and the amendment.
Thank you, convener. The motion is by Councillor Waters, which is to refuse the application on the basis that the proposal as presented is contrary to the local development plan, specifically policies 1A and 1B, placemaking, insofar as it fails to make a positive contribution to the surrounding built environment and doesn't respect the character and amenity of the place. And I'm taking it from what Councillor Waters subsequently stated, that he's founding on criterion C, I believe, of 1B, namely that the design and density should complement the surroundings in terms of appearance, height, scale, and massing materials and finishes. And in addition, that the proposal is contrary to residential policy 17. The amendment is by Councillor Illingworth, which is to approve the application in accordance with the recommendation in the report of handling. I will now pass over to my colleague Danny to take the roll call vote.
Can everyone hear that? Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, Jeff. So members, in accordance with the council standing orders, I'll now take a roll call vote. When I call your name, if you can let me know whether you'll be voting for the motion as proposed by Councillor Watson, seconded by Councillor Cuthbert, or the amendment as proposed by Councillor Illingworth and seconded by Councillor James, both of which have just been the terms of which has just been summarised by my colleague Jeff there. So, Councillor Anderson.
Amendment.
A motion, sorry.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Motion.
Motion.
Councillor Illingworth.
Amendment.
Councillor James.
Amendment.
Councillor Leishman.
Motion.
Councillor Massey.
Amendment.
Councillor McLaren.
Amendment.
Councillor Reid.
Motion.
Councillor Stewart.
Amendment.
Councillor Waters.
Motion.
And Councillor Williamson.
Motion.
Okay, members. I'm just going to confirm with Mr. Fogg. Yeah, so it's been been confirmed by myself and Jeff there that there were 7 votes in favour of the motion and 6 in favour of the amendment. Therefore, the motion will carry.
That means the application is refused. Can I ask the committee if they want to take a 10-minute comfort break? Yes, 10 minutes, so that we can come back here about 1:15. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes, thank you, convener. I'm just going to go through, do a roll call, similar to what I did at the start. So Councillor Anderson, I can see you and yourself. Councillor Braun's also in the chambers. Councillor Cuthbert's here in the chambers, as is Councillor Drysdale and Councillor Illingworth. Councillor James.
Yep, I'm still here, Danny.
Thank you. Councillor Leishman is in the chambers. Self convener, obviously here. Councillor McLaren, you back with us?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Here, present.
Thank you. And Councillor Stewart, Waters and Williamson are all here in the chambers with us. So that's everyone back in the meeting, convener. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. I see we have a point of order from Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, convener. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. In relation to both item 524 and 525 that follows it, representation has been made to me that insufficient notice was given to potential objectors or those wishing to make a deputation to the committee in relation to these proposals. I do not know if that is correct or if it is not, but I'm looking for clarity as to what the requirement is in terms of the standing orders of this committee for the period of notice and for unequivocal assurance from officers that that has been followed on this occasion or not, and if not, then I would propose that we defer consideration of this item. Thanks.
Danny, you can answer that, please.
Yes, thank you, convener, and thank you, Councillor Drysdale. I'm more than happy to answer that. Insofar as notification when the papers go out, we can't notify interested parties. This is just a sort of preface to it. We can't notify interested parties until the papers are published, because obviously deputations are made to the report as opposed to the general sort of premise. So ideally we the standing orders of the council, it's and for this committee, including this committee, papers to be published a minimum of 7 days before the meeting, 7 clear days. Ideally, we do like to do that a little earlier. Unfortunately, we did have some technical difficulties, which meant we were a day, I think we were about eight days clear. It was last Wednesday anyway, so seven days it would have been. We also, for this committee, which isn't a statutory requirement, we do give notice to interested parties that can make a deputation. We give them 5 clear days. Doesn't have to be working days, I must add at this point. And they were also given that because they were notified right away last Wednesday when the papers were published, and they were given until Monday, just a couple of days ago, to notify us. So I'm hugely satisfied that procedures have been followed in accordance with standing orders.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. And just if I can just get further clarity, because I don't want this to be the subject of a subsequent appeal to Scottish ministers on a technicality. So given the explanation that you have just given, which I take at face value, and the serving of notice on Wednesday and the people having to notify yourself by Monday, and that obviously does include the weekend. I'm just wanting, from a legal perspective, Mr. Fogg, if I can draw you into this debate, just to get your confirmation that you are satisfied that procedures have been followed from the description that has been given. Thanks.
Convener, from the description given, this account given by Danny to us this morning, yes, indeed I am. On a further clarification, though, to your remarks about avoiding appeal points, that wouldn't be something that would form part of an appeal on the merits. It would have to be taken up Standards Commission in terms of a complaint about process. So it wouldn't have a bearing in any appeal to the Scottish Minister's Reporters Unit. But more importantly, I'm satisfied based on what we've heard that the correct processes were adhered to in this case.
Okay, I accept your explanations at face value. That process has been followed. Thank you.
Councillor James, you have a comment?
Yeah, thanks very much, convener. Mine was really to back up what Councillor Drysdale was saying. I mean, as a councillor attending community councils, you have to be very careful on what you say when you sit on planning committee. You obviously don't want to express an opinion in a public forum. Needless to say, you can sit and listen, and I am aware that the community council, bearing in mind that this site has been a very, very contentious issue for some time. There's several planning applications which have come in, and it would have been, I thought it would have been a duty of us to at least give a community council the option to make comment. They were, I wrote it down in my notes, 8 minutes to 5 last Wednesday, which even if we're supposed to give 7 days, clear days notice, we started at 10 o'clock this morning. So it's 6.5 days if you're being technically thingy. So I'm also of the opinion, same as Councillor Drysdale, I would have asked for a deferment on this. But again, I take your advice. Thank you.
I think both your Councillor Drysdale and yourself, the points have been made. I would take advice from Danny and from Mr. Fogg. I think we should go ahead with this paper. Thank you.
Point of order again, convener, if I may. I mean, I haven't spoken to Councillor James about this matter at all, and I'm very interested in what he has unearthed as ward councillor. I've had no direct contact with the community council that he refers to. But given the concerns expressed, I wonder if it would be competent to move deferral of this item in order to avoid any possible, what's what I'm looking for, any possible consequences of a failure to apply the strict timetable of 7 days. I wonder if a motion would be acceptable to defer to the next meeting. Thanks.
You give me a minute, I'll take advice on that.
I'm not understanding this. I thought the concern was that there was insufficient time made available to the community council to make a deputation, but as I understand it, they have made such a request timeously, and they are due to be speaking this afternoon. So I'm not quite sure what it is that's being asked for.
Perhaps Councillor James can clarify that point. I'm basically seeking to reflect my original concerns, which were addressed, but then my concerns were added to by Councillor James. So perhaps if I don't know if Councillor James has any further insight into the concerns of the community council and any other objectors.
Convener, if you're happy for me to speak.
Yes.
My concern was around. I'm aware that a number of community councillors were away on holiday. I wasn't aware actually that they'd actually managed to get a deputation. But not my fear, but my concern for the community council is that. I'm not sure who's making a deputation, if I'm honest, but if they are, has the rest of the community council had a chance to comment? The time scale is so short that this site has, like I said just now, has been quite controversial, and I'd like to hear all sides of the argument before I was able to make a decision on it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor James. I'm of a mind to continue with this paper. I believe that the time is adequate to make representations. I believe that Councillor Drysdale's points, as he has clearly stated, have been clarified for him. I may seek the views of any other councillors on the committee. If they have any views on this, I'd like to hear them now. If not, then we will continue with this application. Thank you. Councillor McLaren, you have a comment?
Well, my comment is, well, thank you. Sorry, Convener, thank you. My comment is, I'm basically echoing all the Councillor James, my fellow ward councillor, is saying and stating, and I concur with everything. I would move to defer this application due to the community.
Councillor Rollingworth, you have a question?
What are the consequences of deferring this to the next meeting?
It's not possible to give a entirely confident statement, but the planning authority has a target period for determining this of 8 weeks. I suspect we're already past that. If the committee deferred for additional time to be given to third parties, the applicant would be entitled to treat this as a non-determination by the planning authority and appeal it directly to the Scottish ministers, which would therefore be bypassing the opportunity for this committee to express a view on the application, which would have to be a possibility given the normal periods approved as the policy and procedure of this council have been adhered to in this case, and the community council are here intending to make a deputation this morning.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mike Williamson.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Convener. My point was just really a point of clarification from Bailey McLaren. Was she moving a motion there, or was it just?
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Williamson. No, I wasn't moving a motion. I was merely echoing the conversation that Councillor James had stating the points, and I was merely stating them twice.
Could I just therefore see, actually, my colleague Councillor Drysdale here I mean, he moved a motion earlier. Is that still on the table? Or does it require a second?
I thought it was a point of order.
Yeah.
Followed by, if I may, convener, followed by a motion on the back of Councillor James's comments. I did move a motion. However, if I may, while I have the floor, given that we're talking here principally about the community council's opportunity to comment and to present to the committee today. Just for clarity, are we saying that there is a deputation from the Community Council in the chamber just now that is adequately prepared to make a deputation? Is that the case?
They are here, and you have to presume as much that they are prepared for it.
Okay, in that case, I withdraw my my motion for the time being, and we shall see what comes of their deputation. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we'll continue. The next item is 524. It is item 21/02279/FLL. It's change of use, alterations and extension to agricultural steadings and to form 6 dwelling houses, erection of 2 dwelling houses and associated communal and accelerate children's installation of solar arrays, formation of access road, parking area and associated works at Kinvade Farm, Menady, Perth. Introducing the report is Mr. Williamson. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. As you've already outlined, this application seeks full planning permission for the change of use, alterations and extension to the agricultural steadings in order to form 6 dwelling houses and the addition of a further 2 dwelling houses, all at Kinvade Farm to the northwest of Menady, which itself lies approximately 2.75 kilometres due west of the A9 at Lunkerty. Next slide, please. This aerial extract shows the location of the site to the northwest of Menady and to the west of the C408 road leading from the hamlet, which eventually connects through to Bankfoot 5 kilometres to the north. While located in a partially elevated position above Menady, the site is partially screened to an extent in light of the existing tree coverage alongside the principal roads and garden grounds of existing houses. Longer distance views can be obtained from the B8063 to the south, which is over 600 metres away, although the nearest property, Kinvade House, is located approximately 65 metres to the southwest. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the location of the site in relation to the general groupings of properties around Menady in the wider woodland alongside the access road. Access to the site is taken from the existing farm access to the northeast of the site off the Bankfoot Road. Next slide, please. This third slide shows the proposed site layout. The northern range and linked horse mill are category C listed and located in a central position. It would be converted into 2 semi-detached dwellings. To the south of that lies the U-shaped steading arrangement, which also includes the existing 2-storey farmhouse, which would be altered and reconstructed to form 4 dwelling houses. Apologies, I'm getting some feedback. Is somebody's microphone open? The remaining part of the development would see the erection of 2 eco-houses to the northwest and north of the listed building. In respect of drainage, the connection would be to a private drainage system for foul into a foul water soakaway. Surface water would be to a pond towards the southeastern boundary. An array of solar panels is shown to the leg to the site stretching westwards. Next slide, please. This next slide shows the site layout in slightly greater detail in the delineation of the individual dwelling boundaries and the access arrangements within the site. Next slide, please. This slide shows the ultimate finish for the listed northern range and associated horse mill and its new extension along the northern elevation, replacing one which exists at present. Next slide, please. This subsequent slide shows the elevation facing towards Conveyed House to the southwest, with the corresponding elevation to the southeast beneath it. Materials include reclaimed stone, zinc and slate. Next slide, please. This slide shows the remaining half of the southeast elevation, including the replacement farmhouse of a broadly similar scale to the existing abandoned structure, with its attached double garage. Next slide, please. And this slide gives an indication of the proposed design of one of the enabling eco-houses. These dwellings would be of a low scale, designed to minimise visual impacts with the use of reclaimed stone to the walls and a sedum or zinc roof to the respective eco-houses. I will now move on to a selection of recent photos which will show the various elements of the proposal I have described. Next slide, please. This first photo shows the approach to Conveyed Farm from the northeast and gives an indication of the slight plateau upon which the existing farm is sited. The Category C listed northern range and cylindrical turreted horse mill is in the foreground. Next photo, please. This second photo shows the northeastern range of the U-shaped steading, the rear of the existing farmhouse, and the grassed internal courtyard. Next photo, please. This next photo shows the view southeast into the centre of the courtyard and gives an indication of the existing scale of the buildings to be reused and altered to accommodate the proposed development. Next photo, please. This photo shows the western range of that same U-shaped steading, with a slight impression of how the landscape initially falls away beyond the site before rising again in the distance. Next photo, please. This photo shows the western elevation of the same steading wing and shows the existing attached barn extension, which would be replaced as part of the proposals. Next photo, please. This next photo shows the views from the disused farm buildings towards the southeast and the northern parts of Menidi. It also gives an indication of the trees located close to the application site, as well as the topography which falls to the right-hand side of the photo, which is southwards. Next photo, please. This photo shows the northeastern range of the U-shaped steading, which also abuts the existing farmhouse. The dilapidated extension would be replaced as part of the proposals. Next photo, please. This photo shows the southeastern corner of the existing farm buildings with the farmhouse in particular. Next photo, please. This photo shows the view from the first floor landing window of the farmhouse with views over the undulating farmland in the direction of Red Gorton. Next photo, please. This next photo again shows the internal courtyard within the northeastern range over 2 stories. Next photo, please. This shows the views from the courtyard towards the C-listed northern range. Next photo, please. And this next photo again shows the internal courtyard with the southwestern range over a single story, albeit the opposite side of it is 2 stories due to the topography. Next photo, please. This next photo shows the southern wing from within the internal courtyard. Next photo, please. This next photo was taken from the approximate position of the suds pond. One of the trees on the left-hand side, closest to the green barn, would be lost as a consequence of the development. At the extreme left-hand side of the photo is Conveyed House at the lower level, as previously explained. Next photo, please. This photo shows the grouping of farm buildings from the east. Next photo, please. And this photo shows the eastern gable of the listed building with side profile of the horse mill. Next photo, please. Members will be pleased to know I'm just approaching the last 3 photos. This one shows the alignment of the existing farm access track, which would be upgraded as part of the proposals. Next photo, please. And these last two photographs show the visibility splays, and this is the southern splay. And if you move to the next photo, and the northern visibility splay at the site entrance. Thank you, convener. That now concludes the presentation for this application, and we now return to the site location plan.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. We do have deputations on this item. Can I call Mr. George Black? I believe he is in the room. Mr. Black is the Lunkerty Red Gorton Community Council. Hello, Mr. Black. I'll now hand you over to the Vice Convener, who will run you through the process of what the deputation goes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Black. Are you wanting to proceed with a deputation and subsequent questions, or are you wanting to go straight to questions?
I have a prepared speech.
Okay, you have 10 minutes, and I'll give you a prompt at 9 minutes for you to give you a chance to summarise. Okay, if you'd like to proceed in your own time.
Good afternoon. I'm George Black, the Chair of Lunkerty Red Gorton and Mead Community Council. I'm also a retired police officer with more than 30 years' experience, 8 of which were with what was formerly known as the Traffic Department. I hold certificates in road patrol operations, and I'm a qualified advanced and security escort driver. A former role specifically included road traffic investigations and enforcing road traffic legislation to encourage better road safety. My comments concern the road traffic safety relating to this proposal. The proposed development exits onto the C408, as we've just heard. This road connects Bankfoot to Pitcairn Green. It's a narrow, winding road with a number of blind corners. In many places, it has steep embankments on either side, has limited passing room for 2 vehicles. The road can be quiet, however, it can also become busy with large agricultural vehicles at different times of the agricultural calendar. It's often used also as a rat run at the start and finish of the working day. SatNav directs traffic down this road when there are holdups on the A9. It can be a notoriously dangerous minor road with 4 significant incidents attended by all 3 branches of the emergency services in the last few years. This safety hazard has been recognised in the last 3 planning proposals affecting this road, all 3 being refused by Perth and Kinross Council Planning, in part on road safety concerns. 2 of these were verified or ratified by the Scottish Government reporters on appeal. The 3 proposals referred to contained 60, 30 and 17 car parking spaces. This proposal contains 24 and is within the same parameters of the figures just given. The road traffic report in this proposal states that 85% of vehicles travel at less than 40 miles per hour. The limit for that particular part of the road at the exit is 60. The conclusion must therefore be that 15% of vehicles travel above the 40 miles an hour, with the added exponential of longer stopping distances. The visibility sight line from the proposed development, I think it was the last photograph that we saw in particular there, is restricted due to an adjacent blind corner, and there's a crest in the road there as well. We'll remind people again that that's 60 miles an hour still limit at that point. People should drive in accordance with the conditions, but people often don't. It's not safe to assume this is a safe place purely because 85% of vehicles are travelling at a speed below a set figure as other factors have always to be taken into consideration. 1 in 6 cars are acknowledged to be travelling at higher speeds, which again raises the risk factor exponentially. It's not safe to assume that these ones alone are the most likely to cause accidents, but the mere presence of additional traffic looking to slow down, turn off the road, miss their junction as is possible, and so on, always exists even in normal speed traffic. It is a known factor that many collisions occur within the first few minutes of beginning a journey or when nearing their intended destination. I am particularly concerned that 2 pick-up and drop-off points for school children are being proposed at this part of the road. The road will be busy in the morning rush hour and with a substantial number of cars using the road, whether they are residents, additional or otherwise, or rat runners. There is no bus service there, no public transport in that network. This development, like those in previous proposals, would inevitably produce an unacceptable increase in road safety concerns. To my knowledge, there have been no discernible measures taken to improve the road's infrastructure at that location since the initial published intentions to develop the conveyed steading. We, Community Council, and the general community in the area are not against the steading being developed. We feel the plans should be scaled back and the traffic infrastructure be drastically improved before this may be passed. The last point should be obvious to anyone who has visited the location and seen it for themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Do we have any questions from the committee for Mr. Black? Nope, doesn't seem any questions. You're free to go. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Mr. Black. This has been a question from Councillor James.
Sorry, convener. I'm having trouble. It wouldn't accept me my keyboard. Mr. Black, thank you very, very much for your deputation on behalf of the Community Council. Very, very informative. I explained earlier that at last Community Council I attended, there was brief discussion which I couldn't actually comment on, but we're now in a public forum, planning committee, and I can ask that question. Can I ask you, I think you touched on it at the end, you're not against the development on the footprint, it's the enlarged footprint that you're against?
Yes, that's correct. In general, I'm not going to use. I don't want to use the term eyesore, but it's a dilapidated, as we've seen from the photographs, dilapidated farmhouse. It needs something done to it, but within reason, within scale, and preferably in the footprint rather of before.
Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Mr. Black. That's no more questions now. Thank you. The next deputation is from Mr. Carragher, who is an objector to the application. Thank you. Hello, Mr. Carragher. I'll now hand you over to the deputy convener, who will tell you how the deputation goes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Carragher. I see that you're ready to give your deputation. Are you just want to proceed in your own time?
I did have in my notes, good morning, everybody, but it's been on a bit longer than I think we all expected. So good afternoon. I'm Stuart Carragher and I'm a resident of Menidi. I've been tasked with saying a few words on behalf of the community, which, to be honest, has been difficult to gather given the short notice. So I'll try and do the best I can. I think the most important thing to say at the outset is that the community is not against any form of development at Conveyed. You know, that's not what we're about. I think really, in fact, the opposite is true. Everyone I've spoken to would welcome some form of activity up there, and rather than continue to let the buildings deteriorate as we've seen over the years under the current ownership. But I think the overwhelming feeling is that any application It needs to be proportionate to what's been there previously. It needs to be sensitive to the existing Manidi settlement. And as George alluded to, it can't risk the existing safety of residents in Manidi, or indeed new residents who may move into Manidi. And I'm afraid in this case, unfortunately, the application as it's currently structured fails on all these counts. Proportionate. This is an extremely large development. You've got 8 houses, multiple car garages, storage buildings, machinery buildings, an industrial grade solar array at the top of a hill that can be seen from all around. The application, and I know whoever who puts down the headline application, it says here as altering and extending the existing steading, which all sounds very reasonable. The reality, however, is that the site is to be demolished and that this development will be from scratch. So please be under no illusions that this is anything other than a complete rebuild. Even the listed horse mill that's there is to be demolished and rebuilt in an authentic manner. So this is complete rebuild, new build. So let's not have any misunderstanding as to what we're dealing with here. Comments by the applicant that this is a like for like, that's simply not the case. This development will be done on an expanded site that is multiple times the size of the existing footprint. It's no coincidence that this development, unlike all previous proposals on the site, is a joint one with the neighbouring farmer, Mr. Ritchie. Mr. Ritchie now has part of one of his grazing fields in the development, which is simply testament to how large this development actually is. I'm not sure what they are, but I'm sure there will be reasons why you can have a grazing field and then of course it become a building site when no change of use has been applied for. I don't know the answer to that. Equally, I'm unsure why this complete new build doesn't breach the housing and countryside guidance, when under any objective measure that would seem to be the case. Complete new build, sheer number of buildings, new buildings, the total sprawl of the site, style, particularly the eco houses, not in keeping with the traditional style of the steading. None of this is within policy, and yet here we are. Yeah. I do apologise for being aggressive here. I'm sorry, and that probably doesn't do me any favours. But this is the 7th planning application we've had here since 2015, and the residents of Manidi are very concerned. The proposal as it stands is significant overdevelopment of the site and is significantly out of character with the neighbourhood, and it's not within guideline. Just to give context, Manidi is an ancient hamlet with 5 listed buildings in the vicinity of this farmsteading, which stands at the top of a hill overlooking the village, and therefore really has, a bit like the Murray's Hall driving range, this has a dominant effect on its surroundings. So it's important that it be developed in a sympathetic fashion to maintain the unique character of the area. The proposal with 8 houses adds almost half as much again to the Manidi settlement. And it's not unreasonable for residents to have obvious concerns around noise pollution, light pollution, privacy issues, as well as the significant traffic dangers noted by George and the complete lack of public transport in the area. And I think residents have the right to have those concerns addressed. There have been 3 recent planning proposals to redevelop this steading, one for 4 houses, one for 5 houses, which were approved, and one for 9 houses, which was knocked back. All 3 of those proposals utilise the existing footplate. It wasn't complete new build. These used the existing buildings that were there as the basis of the development, and that's not the case here. Traditional farmsteadings in Perthshire are built in a compact fashion with a farmhouse, barns, byres and bothies all constructed around a tight central core. I mean, that's what makes it such an attractive place to live. This development spreads out scattered fashion on the top of a hillside, totally at odds with its historic environment. As I started, so I'll finish. We're not objecting to the entirety of this proposal. We welcome the development of the existing farmsteading. It's these numerous additional buildings, these new separate houses, the new isolated 3-car garages, communal store, machine plant house, solar array that we object to. The proposal as it stands is overdevelopment and out of character. A proposal for 6 houses, I think, would get local support if it's done in the style and on the footprint that we have. So I would urge your consideration on that basis. And, you know, for those of you, if you haven't seen it, I would urge you to visit and really see for yourselves that this is at the top of a hill and it has a dominant place, you know, not too dissimilar to one of the, you know, one of the other planning applications that we had earlier. It's not out of line with that. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Carragher. Are there any questions for Mr. Carragher? Councillor Braun.
Just thank you, convener. Thank you for your presentation. Just to be clear, you've both said you're not against the concept. So just to clarify and be clear, you're talking about actually refurbishing, if you wish, the existing buildings to habitable status as holiday homes with no additional building. So using what's there. Sorry.
That would certainly be our preference, but I think if you were to say to the local community that if the cost structure, I mean, I get the financial viability issue that we would have to knock down, but rebuild it significantly on the existing footprint without all this other stuff that's going on, then I think you could, then I think that the local community, and I'm looking to get some feedback because I haven't, you know, I've been able to speak to a number of people, but not, I think you would find that that would be received positively by the local. But the problem is you're rebuilding, you're extending, and then you're doing all this other stuff on top. That's what's really causing issue.
Thank you, Mr. Congress. As there is no more questions, you're free to go. Thank you. Thank you for your deputation. Thank you. We now have a deputation from the applicant, Mr. Thompson, and he's been accompanied by the architect, Mr. Pulini. I believe they're on the phone. Are they, Audrey? Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, can you hear me now? Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'll now hand you over to the Deputy Convener who will run you through the procedure. Thank you.
No problem.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I don't know if you're both wanting to speak, but your total time is 10 minutes if you want to divide that between yourselves.
Yeah, I'll speak for the first bit, and then if my client wants to add anything into it, he'll come in at the end before the 10 minutes stop, if that's okay.
Okay, and I will give you a prompt at 9 minutes and for you to give you time to summarise over the last minute.
Fantastic, thank you.
Are you ready to proceed?
Yeah, by the way.
Okay, in your own time.
Thank you. Good afternoon, councillors and other professionals. My name is John Frullani. I'm the architect that prepared and submitted this application on behalf of my client. I'd like to open up by saying from day one we have worked with Perth and Kinross Council, the individual planning officer and all the consultees, statutory consultees as part of this. My client at great expense and cost and time to himself has commissioned dozens of reports. Drainage, trees, roads, viability, ecology, bats, everything that's been asked of him to provide, we have provided. I think the solution that we're at, it all hinges along, and I'll touch in a minute on the comments by Mr. Black and Mr. Carragher. It all hinges about retaining the listed building, and that's one of the points I wanted to state, without accusing Mr. Carragher of not having the correct facts. He does state that we're demolishing the horse mill. We are not. There's the second last application that was withdrawn, yes, was for the demolition of the horse mill. If you read the report and the application in front of you now, we are retaining the horse mill. We are refurbishing and we are extending and modernising. We are not demolishing the horse mill. With regards to the rest of the properties, once again, going back to these reports, all these buildings have been condemned by the structural engineer. There is no... It's very idealistic to think that you can salvage a building when it's beyond structural repair. Some buildings you can, these buildings you can't, they're not fit for human occupation, let alone animal occupation in their current form. So I think it's very idealistic to think that you can always retain a building. It's not, it's based on the consultant reports that are gathered, and they inform your decision and strategy of how you move forward. I think, like I say, going on to the kind of main comments and objections from Mr. Black and Mr. Carragher, the traffic concerns raised by Mr. Black, obviously very experienced individual, and I'm not in any way questioning his comments. All I would say in response to that is we've had a full report carried out by Ken Perry, who's the director of Millards. He's had our clients commissioned a traffic speed survey, and Lachlan McLean, who is an employee of Perth and Kinross Council Roads Department, has commented that he has no objections to the proposals based on that survey and report that we have submitted. So like I say, I am not in any way calling into question Mr. Black's expertise. All I'm saying is that we went through a process, appointed a consultant who has engaged, carried out the reports, engaged the local authority, and your own local authority, Roads Department, are satisfied that there's no issues. With regard to Mr. Carragher's objections, and I think to summarise his, they're obviously based on they're not opposed to development, but would like it to be scaled back, and also the question of the new build element. What the general public probably aren't privy to is the extensive viability statement that our client has commissioned and had carried out. I will summarise that for all people listening. It basically says if you were to not build the new build houses, there's a £300,000 loss in developing the existing staging building and listed building. So what that means in really simple terms is the project would not go ahead. Now, I don't think anybody would agree they want to see that building form, group, whatever, cluster, whatever you want to call it, sit there with no work happening to it, and in the next 5–10 years it'll be a pile of rubble. Like I say, going back to, and without repeating myself using the word idealistic, everybody knows the cost of construction materials is skyrocketing at the moment. Any developer at the end of the day is looking to make a small profit. If there's no profit in doing just the 6 units in the steading, why would you do it? Through extensive conversations with the planning authority, believe it or not, there was actually a proposal tabled by the planning officer that maybe we put one more unit in to make it more viable, to which my client declined because he was very conscious of overdeveloping the site. So like I say, although yes, in an idealistic world, it'd be great to just keep the existing building and refurb it, it doesn't work for a number of reasons. The building structurally is I don't want to use the technical term knackered, but it is effectively, you've seen the pictures, it's fallen to bits. And I'd just like to say once again to re-emphasise that we're not demolishing the horse mill. That was the previous application. If the members and the local community council would care to look at the report in front of them and the drawings, that you'll see that the existing horse mill has been retained. That is once again at a great personal cost to my client. The cost and work involved in working around that bit of the building, which can be saved, and the only reason that much time and effort and cost has been expended on it is because it is a listed building. Whereas the other buildings, like I say, it is not financially viable to retain them. They are being built back in a very similar, almost to the nearest millimetre footprint. So yeah, like I say, I'd pass you on to my client now if he's got anything to say, and we would welcome any questions from you. But in summary, we need the new build element to make this project viable. We think we've designed some sympathetic single-storey eco new builds that complement the character of the existing building. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Peter Thompson here. Ladies and gentlemen, councillors, chair, just want to reiterate very much what the architect's been saying. From day one, I've engaged with the previous planning officer, Mariana Porter, through pre-arts and got very positive feedback, and I've complied throughout the whole process, listened to the feedback on the initial planning consultation and withdrew that. This is a restoration of a listed building. There's no question about that. Furthermore, if this doesn't, the two new builds are, as John says, and I repeat, are fundamental to avoiding a substantial loss. It's that simple in today's economics. And again, I reiterate that Mariana, when we were going to do the restoration, she said you can have 3 new builds. I declined because of the density issue, and we reduced some of the outbuildings And this was in the face of comments that were made that I was opportunistic. I'm not. I'm a passionate conservation developer, and we want to safeguard this beautiful building and framed in the landscape, but in perpetuity. If I can't get this determined positively, then the building will be lost. To a man and a woman, the community appears to be very, very favour, as Mr. Carragher and Mr. Black has stated, that they want the retention of this. It's just the price of a small, discreet, low-lying eco building set from within the curtilage of the old haystack, the stackyard, that forms a demarcation, which is perfectly acceptable within policy, as a demarcation from the new contemporary builds with the old traditional. Should this planning application not be determined, then this building will be lost, as I said. There will also be £106,000 lost to the Perth and Kinross budgets for infrastructure, education, social housing. The road traffic is an important aspect, and we've bent over backwards to ensure that there are no issues in terms of the planning policy and the road transport. Furthermore, the community, including the interest in a number of the houses, includes a serving police officer and a health environmentalist, and they want to drive a lobby to get the 40-mile zone down. If it is that important that these speeds are reduced legally, then that would be the way to go. On top of that, they are looking to divert funds to look for increasing the lay-bys and the like. So there's a lot of things we can do as a community together if we all talk. I do hope that you can now take all the evidence and judge it logically and dispassionately. Thank you.
I think that's us, if that's okay with you guys, unless you have any questions.
Thank you very much for both of you for your deputation. I will now open it up to questions. Any of the committee have questions? Councillor Rollingworth.
Thank you, convener. Question is about the eco houses. What are the features of the eco houses that make them so eco? Thank you.
They're effectively designed to be off-grid. So with the solar array, the construction methods, it's recycled stone, high insulation. They're effectively, we're looking to achieve the gold standard under the building regulations as well. So yeah, it's as energy efficient, as self-sufficient as it can be. There is a number of other factors, like I say, like using locally sourced materials, trying to cut down construction waste. But yeah, it's a catch-all, and a bit of turf roof on them as well.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Waters, you have a question? Oh no, it's been asked. Sorry. Councillor Williamson, you've got a question. Oh, I'm getting confused here. Councillor Drysdale first. Thank you.
Thank you, convener, and thank you for the deputation. The applicant made reference in his presentation there to social housing as a component of what he was saying.
We made no reference to social housing. Sorry to interrupt, but we didn't mention social housing once.
I don't think
it was developer contributions he made reference to. So as part of the planning application, obviously there's developer contributions.
Thanks. The word social housing we use. However, the point of my question is to ask why is there no element of this application which is affordable housing in line with the local development plan?
In answer to your question, we're making there's a contribution of £56,000 as part of the contributions package requested by the council for affordable housing. So we are making it a contribution as per standard, which worked out by your colleagues or members of the council.
Sorry, no, that wasn't my question. My question was, why is there no actual? I recognise that there is an offer to comply with the policy in terms of the alternative, but my understanding of the policy is such that the housing is required, not the contribution, unless the inclusion of affordable housing is unviable.
Yeah, so it is. So
has there been a viability assessment?
Yes, and we contacted social housing providers who said that the maintaining of two social houses in that rural location would not be viable, and therefore they requested a contribution instead. And that was the exact same as the previous application.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
No problem at all. Apologies for cutting in.
Thank you. Councillor Williamson.
My question is about, are these properties, is it the intention to use them for self-catering lets or residential?
Sorry, self-catering or residential? Residential. So you buy the house and you live in it. They're not holiday lets. Well, we can't control what anybody does that buys the house, but no, they're not been sold or marketed as holiday lets, and they're not been retained by my client as holiday lets. They've been sold to the mainstream general public.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. As there are no more questions in the chat, thank you again for the deputation. You're free to go. Thank you.
No problem at all. Thank you very much.
We can move on now to questions for officers. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, convener. Just one of the initial comments that were made was that if there was any need for a change of use. Now the grass from the pictures comes right up to the buildings, and one of the comments of members from the community council was that it currently gets used as grazing right up to the building, and there's obviously some development going to go on that. What are the rules around that from a planning perspective?
Just to answer upon that, Councillor Waters, obviously the red line application site boundary delineates the extent of the application site in this instance. It shows basically the extent of where garden ground would in essence be changed to where there's an area of communal allotment space and growing space for within the site where the roads obviously align. Therefore, anything then that's left in the applicant's ownership out with that would remain as agricultural land. So the change of use is in essence incorporated into this application that we consider before us.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Drysdale, you have a question?
Thank you, convener. Yeah, my question is just similar to my question to the applicant around affordable housing. There is obviously a narrative in the papers before us about developer contributions. Can you just confirm from the council's perspective, from planning's perspective, that a thorough viability assessment has determined that it is not viable to have two affordable houses in this development? Obviously, we have an issue around affordability of rural housing, and this might have been an opportunity to start to address that serious issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Yes, as has already been touched upon, there is some commentary within the committee report itself, so I would draw members' attention to paragraph 46 on page 159, which outlines the developer contributions that would be necessary to this application, and that's all been built into the development viability statement as well. Paragraph 51 on page 160 highlights that from planning and housing strategy, it outlines the position that, in essence, the retention of the listed buildings and the sensitive nature of these sites is necessary to secure the financial viability of the development proposals. But as we also heard against the applications at Crook of Devon, instances where you have 2 units to be potentially taken on, and was also echoed by the agent John Trelawney, where there's such a low level of development, you know, for a registered social landlord, for example, they have great difficulty on taking on and managing a site on that basis. They need a much greater number to be able to sustain that at any point in time. And that's why in this instance, when all things considered in respect of the retention of the listed buildings, etc., we would be willing to take a commuted sum of the £56,000 in this instance to then put to affordable housing and social housing in another development that would better meet the needs of the community.
Thank you for that answer, and yeah, I do hope that the funds are redirected in the manner you have outlined there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cuthbert, you've got, sorry, I do apologise. Councillor McLaren, you're next.
Thank you, convener. Well, my question for the officers is picking up on the concerns about road safety by the local community. Is it what would be the process to extend the 40-mile limit to just beyond the entrance to this site? You know, as was stated by George Black, that currently that road sits at 60 miles per hour speed limit at that point. Is this something that we within the application today can address for the community?
Mr. Salman, are you going to answer that?
Yes, happy. In terms of the process, it would require a change to the traffic road order, regulation order, in terms of extending the 40 mile an hour. In terms of satisfying the concerns today on that, road safety have been consulted and did not require such a condition. I would suggest it would be prudent to further discuss that with road safety if the committee is minded to do so. However, that is something that could be progressed without the planning process. Indeed, in terms of the speed surveys that were carried out, it shows good compliance if a theoretical 40 mile an hour was extended. So that would certainly offer some support for its extension. However, I would leave final word on that matter with road safety.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, convener. I'm just looking at the proposed layout plan. My understanding is that the dark red dashed line is the extent of the area that's covered by the application, and the fine lines are the sort of subdivision into plots for the various properties. I'm just wondering, in terms of the dark red dashed line, does that mean that this area of ground becomes residential? So it changes from agriculture to residential? And does this then form a building group which in future might be seeing more development and infill plots?
I'll maybe cover that. I see where you're coming from, but what you're extrapolating out to is something that would require planning permission. So what we have here is the group within the steadings and the other 2 properties with clearly defined curtilages or garden areas. Beyond that, there are areas that contain landscaping, suds ponds, other facilities, communal areas, etc. there is quite a restrictive policy in relation to building groupings, timings, etc., etc. But the bottom line is any proposal that may or may not ever come forward for that and isn't before us today would require planning permission, and it would need to be considered at that point in time. So I would focus on what we have before us today rather than what may or may not happen at some point in the future.
We have got a question from Councillor Anderson. Oh, you and you yourself. I wasn't sure if you were putting it in for him. Okay. Councillor Lang.
Thank you, Convener. Am I right in saying that the road referred to is actually part of the cycle network from Perth to Inverness?
Mr. Salman?
Yes, that is correct, yes.
So by definition, then it's a relatively quiet road.
I wouldn't say that that is the definition used as a prerequisite to be included as part of the National Cycle Network, no. But certainly, anecdotally, there are low traffic flows on the route, and the route is substantially below its capacity in terms of traffic use. It's also thought in terms of road safety impact, the trip generation likely to be impacted by this development is low. You are looking at, during peak hours, perhaps up to low double-digit traffic movements. And it's not thought that this would significantly impact upon the existing road safety.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Councillor Anderson.
My comments is wonderful for the officers. Remember back in the early 1990s when we had a Manidi development, possibly in this area, about 1,800 houses. We were looking at one of the options of development around the Perth area at that time. This is slightly smaller development, but I'm just concerned about the wording of what's an array of solar panels or whatever that means. You know, they're either fixed to the roof or on the ground, or is it? What does that mean?
I'll cover that, Paul, save you, sorry. A solar array is a terminology to define a grouping of solar panels. Well, as shown in the plans and set out in the report, this is on the ground to the west of one of the additional homes. Plans detail what and where the solar panels are. One of the slides showed that. We could bring that up if you were unable to view the plan.
I see there's no more questions on this application. Can I ask for a motion on it, please? Councillor Illingworth, you wish to speak?
Yeah, I'm happy to propose a motion that we accept, that we give permission to this this paper.
Do we have a seconder? We have an amendment from Councillor James. I've not seen a seconder for this motion. No one. Then Councillor Anderson, you're seconding.
No, I agree. Yeah, I'll second.
Thank you. We have an amendment put forward by Councillor James.
there's a surprise. Thanks, convener. Yes, as has been said by the two gentlemen that attended to speak on this item, they're not in they're not in a disagreement with planning on this site. However, it's the scale of this. If it was within the footprint of what's already there, the farm, I think that would be acceptable. However, I would propose refusal of this application as too large a development. It's outside the footprint and also on the grounds of traffic safety. We've already been to the Scottish reporter, who's turned it down for that very reason on previous occasions. I'm just looking, I was here desperately looking at the LDP for reasons for refusal. I'm looking at policy 1B. It says consider and respect, policy 1B, particularly B, consider and respect site topography and any surrounding important landmarks, views or skylines. This is visible from the village, and the two extra properties. I also have an issue, probably a comment, wrong thing, but if you put the word eco in front of a house, they seem to think that just automatically gives you a right to build. They're just two houses, and I don't see the need other than an economic benefit. And we're always told that the cost isn't a planning consideration. So for that reason, I think that it's unnecessary for the two extra houses, but on this, I would refuse it on those reasons.
Convener, can I just come in on an aspect that Councillor James raised there? I think he's wrong in saying that cost is not a planning consideration. As a generality, it may not be, but we're looking here in particular at the retention of a listed building. And as part of that, there's been a viability statement submitted as part of the application, which has been seen and accepted. And the information given, which has not been contradicted, is that that discloses that there would be a £300,000 deficit, but for the inclusion of the two additional houses that are part of the proposal. And therefore, on that basis, I'd be concerned about that aspect of your reason for refusal and it not being reasonable as a reason for refusal in the absence of something compelling to suggest that the information is wrong, which I don't think you've heard today. So the separate reason you gave was road safety, and you've made reference, as indeed the objector, one of the deputations did, to a past application having been refused and that refusal upheld on appeal. However, I don't know about that matter. What I do know is that it's not been opposed by the planning transportation team, and Mr. Dean has spoken of it being a relatively light level of traffic flow and that they being satisfied in terms of their criteria in their assessment of this application, which doesn't make your road safety grounds incompetent, but it would give me reservations about its prospects of being defended successfully on appeal.
Okay, I take your point. Thank you, and I stand corrected on the cost. I'll have a look at the placemaking on the other reason. What about? I was saying in particular, policy 1B regarding the wider landscape. It should be should have respect of the wider landscape and character of the area.
Convener, if I may come in on looking to second a variation of Councillor James's motion or amendment. Go ahead. Thank you. I wonder if, excuse me, yeah, I am minded to second Councillor James's amendment. But I wonder if, given the comments of Mr. Fogg, whether that amendment might be restricted to policy 1B, B and C, which is, if I can paraphrase, to consider and respect site topography, ... as well as the wider landscape character of the area, and also that the design and density should complement its surroundings in terms of appearance, height, scale, massing, etc. And in particular, it's the scale. So for that reason, I would support an amendment that revolved around policy 1B, B and C.
I think the first thing to do, given that the amendment comes from Councillor James, is seek confirmation that he's happy to have his amendment advised in the manner.
Amend the amendment. That's what I was alluding to just now. I was looking for. I've got the LDP up on my screen. I've just found it now, and I would concur with Councillor Drysdale. Thank you.
Anticipating that. The only and it is ultimately a matter for the committee. I think it's competent, possibly just, but I would observe that, as I understood it, the position taken by the deputations were that they were content with the 6, and in the existing footprint, it was the additional 2 eco houses proposed to. So it's difficult to pinpoint what aspects of the landform, landmarked or skylines would be impacted on proposal. The scale, perhaps, because it's 6. Say you haven't heard evidence to suggest that 6 is overdeveloped itself, but going to accept that it's a competent amendment, but I do have reservations about its robustness.
Councillor Illingworth, do you want to sum up as?
Thank you, Convener. This is a small development in a quiet rural area. It meets a defined need for more and more houses. I don't think the concerns of the community around road safety are particularly relevant because of the low level of traffic on the road, and so I'm happy to and also content that the planning department have done their job correctly in recommending approval. So thank you.
Councillor James, you want to sum up for the amendment?
Only in as far as, Convener, that if you're seeking expert opinion on an area, it's usually a good idea to consult the people that live there. Whilst our traffic department are experts, and I have a lot of respect for them, people that use those roads in particular on a day-to-day basis will probably disagree with the comments just passed, but I'm happy to go with the amendment as stated.
I'll now hand over to Mr. Fogg to clarify the amendment and the motion.
Thank you, Convener. The motion is by Councillor Illingworth. Yes, to approve in accordance with the recommendation of the Director of Planning in the report of handling, and the amendment is by Councillor James, which is to refuse the proposal on the grounds that it is contrary to the local development plan's placemaking policy 1B, criteria B and C, specifically in relation to respecting topography surrounding landmark views or skyline, and that the design and density complements its surroundings in terms of appearance, height, scale, massing, materials, finishes and colours, and that's seconded by Councillor Drysdale. Pass over to Mr. Williams to take the roll call vote.
Thank you, Jeff. Members, as with the previous application, when I call your name, you can let me know whether you'll be voting for the motion from Councillor Illingworth and Councillor Anderson, or the amendment from Councillor James and Councillor Drysdale. Councillor Anderson.
Motion.
Councillor Braun.
Amendment.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Amendment.
Councillor Drysdale.
Amendment. Amendment.
Councillor Rollingworth.
Motion.
Councillor James.
Amendment.
Councillor Leishman.
Amendment.
Councillor Massey.
Motion.
Councillor McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor Reid.
Motion.
Councillor Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Waters.
Amendment.
And Councillor Williamson.
Amendment.
Okay, thank you, members. That was 6 votes in favour of the motion and 7 in favour of the amendment. Therefore, the amendment will carry.
So that means the amendment carries, planning permission is refused.
Convener, if I may, conscious of officers' time, etc., are we having a lunch break?
Yes, that was my intention, to do the next one and then have a lunch break after this next one. That's okay with the committee.
Convener, lunch break would be nice, I must admit, but I'm on a time scale as well. I'm just wondering if the next ones are quite quick. If you think they might be, we could work our way through. I'm happy to go with the majority though, but
Convener, I don't know if you can hear us. Can you tell us what's happening to us online? We're not getting any sound.
Out for 2 minutes. We've allowed them to go out for 2 minutes. Well, one of them's back now.
Okay, thanks.
if the committee is in agreement, we'll do this next one, and after that we'll have a half-hour lunch breaks, and there's 2 more plus the pans to do after the lunch break. That's okay with the committee? Okay, we move on to the next one, which is 21/02280/LBC. Alterations and extension to buildings to form 6 dwelling house, Conveyed Farm, Munady, Perth. And to introduce the support, Mr. Williams. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Convener. Following on from the previous application on the agenda, this application seeks listed building consent for the physical works to the listed steading buildings, which date from the early 19th century and are mainly of stone and slate construction. Next slide, please. Again, this aerial extract shows the location of the site to the northwest of Munady, as outlined in the previous application. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the location of the site in relation to the general groupings of properties around Munady and the wider woodland alongside the access road. Next slide, please. This third slide shows the proposed site layout, which has already been outlined to members. However, in respect of the application for listed building consent, the new extensions onto the buildings are illustrated in green. Next slide, please. This next slide shows the site layout in slightly greater detail and the delineation of the individual dwelling boundaries. Next slide, please. This slide shows the ultimate finish for the listed northern range and associated horse mill and its new extension along the northern elevation, replacing one which exists at present. Next slide, please. We'll now move on to a selection of the photos, a couple of which you will have already seen. The first photo shows the approach to Conveyed Farm from the northeast, and the Category C listed northern range and cylindrical turreted horse mill is in the foreground. Next photo, please. This photo shows a more detailed view from the north at the location of one of the new dwellings. Again, the listed northern range and horse mill is in the foreground. Next photo, please. The next photo is taken towards the south, with the chimney of Conveyed House just visible beneath the tree on the right-hand side of the photo. Next photo, please. This photo gives a more close-up indication of the exterior of the horse mill, which is in a poor state of repair. Next photo, please. This photo shows one of the existing openings, which would be reused as part of the proposal. Next photo, please. This photo shows the intricate nature of the horse mill roof, which, as already noted, is in an exceptionally poor state of repair. Next photo, please. This next photo shows the view from within the horse mill to the northwest and the approximate location of the previously mentioned solar PV panels. Next photo, please. This shows a picture of the interior of the horse mill. Next photo, please. This next internal photo shows part of the northern range with vaulted interior and stone walls. Next photo, please. This is just a view in the opposite western direction internally to show the condition of the building. Next photo, please. This shows the exterior of the eastern part of the northern range. And next photo, please. This next photo shows the western part of the northern range. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes the presentation for this application, and we now return to the site location plan.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for officers? Councillor James.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, just for clarity, Mr. Williams, I think it was probably the first slide you showed. You said that it was for the properties highlighted in green. Just for clarity, it is only the former steading and not the 2 proposed new buildings they're talking about. I'm keen to see this as somebody who used to live in a former pony house or pony mill. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. Just to clarify, Yeah, my reference to the extensions in green were to the new build elements that would be added on to the northern range of the horse mill. But the other bits that were coloured green are kind of separate to the proposal. What we're looking at here is the alterations to the listed building.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? Councillor Braun. Oh no, sorry, Councillor Braun, you're no more questions. So can I ask for a motion? Councillor Braun, you're.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I just the motion to approve the paper. I think everyone's agreed that something needs to be done on this site. and from the last paper, it was obviously a disagreement on what is done on the proposed plans there. But I think, given the fact that the buildings are in such a poor state of repair, I think it would be an ideal time to remove this hurdle from the developer's perspective. I put a motion forward to approve the list of building consent here. At least that's ready for them when they come back with a suitable plan. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Reid, you're seconding.
Happy to second and happy to beat Councillor James.
Thank you. So that passes. So we'll take a half-hour break for lunch. If we can be back here at 2:20. That's okay.